kind of grab your last glass of wine and have a little noshing over there with Judy Creighton. I wanted to thank Judy Creighton for doing the fondue, and for Gala Lisa. Thank you very much. Beautiful job. And might want to find a seat. I'm Monika Rose, and I'm director of Manzanita Writers Press. But I couldn't do this alone, so I wanted to point out our board members who are here. And back there, standing up, helping with the books, is Patty Grant. And Linda Toren, who's going to come up and speak in a little bit. She's our director of voices, and she's also put out edited 3 books that are out today. So it's really exciting. I want to talk about our wonderful production team here, and Aaron Cameron, who not only is running the show with Sarah, but he's done editing for the videos that you're going to be seeing. And what we're going to be seeing are video clips. They're excerpts from the longer videos that are on YouTube. So these are all hour-long videos. And I knew you wouldn't want to be here till 4 in the morning or no longer, because there's, 20-something videos. So maybe 25 videos. So you're going to enjoy watching that. And thank you to Aaron, and thank you to Lydia. Lydia Cameron did the interviews, many of the interviews, along with Linda Toren. And she's in charge of the oral history project program. And I also wanted to, I'm missing somebody. Oh, Ann Seeley's helping us. She's not on the board, but she's helping us back there. She's been a long-time member, and her mother was, so she was at the helm, and we was sort of terrible. She's passed now. Mary Sexton at the doorway. She greeted you when you came in. I'm missing somebody. Anyway, okay, I'll think of it in a moment. Sarah, but Sarah's not on the board. I'm going to introduce her separately. But she's been instrumental in putting this whole program together. But more for Sarah, well, Aaron would have had to do it. But Sarah's experience, she's had years and years of videography and film experience. And so she's an author as well, Sarah Lunsford. And so I'll talk about her a little bit. But now, I don't know if you know a lot about our press and what we do, but I did want to talk about that a little bit, maybe later in a break or something. But we not only produce the books that you see on the table and more, not every book is there right now, but we also put on arts programs. We have classes, we have the Voices of Wisdom program, a writing program for seniors in our county. And as poet laureate now, I'll be doing some poetry programs. We've already done a few, and looking forward to more. So our press has been in the arts. We originated in 1984, actually, and have been printing since 1985. We had books out. Eleanor Household, which is Gail Callis' mom. She was in our writing group way at the beginning there, and we printed some of her poetry. And so I would like to recognize John and Gail Callis, who provided this lovely room and this lovely venue. They're just so important to our community, and we'd like to honor them further, and to know that they've got a great book out. John and Gail look at the Callis family and history and tradition. And before I say too much, I know Conrad's going to talk about that. And just I hope everybody has a program, because we'll take a little break at 2:30 in between the film, and then the Voices of Wisdom readers who will read from the book. I'll introduce, this is Conrad Lodeser, very important person here at Ironstone, public relations, and he'll tell more about what's going on here. Oh, and he was poet laureate last year, the year before. He was our very first poet laureate in San Luis County. And Linda Toren was also our second poet laureate. He's on the third. Okay.
I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I just really wanted to say, especially, really nice to have again John and Gail, here, coming up from Lodi. And they've been, I've been at IS for like 21 years, and I've had a lot of different hats here, representing locally, regionally, statewide. Kind of pulled back a little bit after COVID, to kind of part-time, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, sometimes other days for special events. And I mean, I couldn't begin. One of the things I did want to say is what I am here is do these hour and a half to 2 hour estate tours, because I couldn't even begin otherwise just to talk about the history and how this came to be what it is and how it tied in with the gold rush, the wine industry in general. And so many different things have happened here, but it's John and Gail and the visionaries behind this. And people thought that they were, people thought John was crazy when he started to build something like this. And many times when I've introduced John to people, I've introduced him as the crazy one, because John gets a big smile on his face, because he says, all my life people have been telling me I'm crazy. And you tell John he's crazy, he's got this kind of look at these blue eyes and heads, and it's like, no, this is what we're going to do. If it doesn't work, we'll tear it down and start all over again. And it's so many different things you can touch upon. I just scratched the surface when I'm doing these hour and a half and 2 hour estate tours. And I was really happy to see them coming up, but all of you to be here today, because we didn't know what the weather was going to be, really. And when I talked to Gail, I think last night, and I said, do you think you're going to make it? She says, as long as we don't have to get in a raft to float it, we'll be there. So, fortunately, we had this beautiful little break in between. And Monika's going to really, I've always been really supported very much Manzanita, the Arts Council. And as I said, John and Gail have been very supportive of that and way beyond that as well. But I got to watch myself, because that's not what this is about. But if any of you haven't been around Ironstone and you're interested, sometime in the course I'll be here all afternoon, of course. Please get a hold of me if you'd be interested in coming, going on one of these estate tours on a day maybe a little bit different than this, and I can kind of fill you in a lot more. This is really great to have you all here today. I'm going to turn it back to Monika, and I think she'll pick it up from here in terms of all the different people.
What now?
It's all yours, yeah.
Oh, yes. I expected to kind of
No, I just...
We have a running joke about that. I wanted to talk a little bit more about Sarah, and also CCTV, Calaveras Community Television, has been instrumental
Yeah.
in helping us in this project. We couldn't have done it without them. You may have read a little bit about the background of the project, but we got the grant 2 years ago, and Sarah Garner and Sarah Lunsford at the CCTV, both of them at the time, just jumped at this and wanted to help. They're eager to help. And not only did they teach courses in the smartphone, laptop, things like that, to seniors. They taught several courses. But they provided the studio for one-on-one help, and also helped with the filming. We couldn't have done it without CCTV. So big shout out to your community television. It's just awesome. They have something called a creative hub and creator hub. And so you can go there if you're interested in doing a podcast or a show, maybe a film. You can go see Sarah Garner. They're looking for content. and content creators. And they have group, the content creator group. And so you're really going to enjoy it, meet some people, and learn how to do these technological things that are beyond some of us, but you learn. Sarah is an author, Sarah Lunsford, and she has created several books under her belt. She was an editor for, she was writing many articles for the Lode Star. You probably read many of her articles in years past. So wonderful things. And she's done the books, the wine, country wine. That was a historic
History of
series
the
books.
History of the Gold Country Wineries.
What is it?
History of the Gold Country Wineries.
History of the Gold Country Wineries, and she did that book.
Yes.
So, you know, she's an expert in all of this, so special things. I also, I don't want to forget, I was going to read a list of our sponsors in the book. These are, and I want to talk about our major sponsors, really. California Humanities, you can read a little bit about them, go online. This is the second grant we received from them, and this was a very large grant and had many facets to it. So I really feel grateful to California Humanities. They have wonderful programs they have provided, and our own Calaveras Community Foundation has supported us for years. Many of our volumes were put out because of Calaveras Community Foundation. I really want to give them a shout out. They're just one of the gems of our county. Many people couldn't survive without their very generous donations. So, Ironstone, we talked about Ironstone a little bit, and Conrad did. We go back a long ways with Ironstone. We've had many events here, workshops and classes and Gala events. So we're very thankful to be able to be in this beautiful room and put on this program. Also, in the Voices of Wisdom, there are many people who have supported us and donated, and including the Volunteer Center of Calaveras County. Marty, could you stand, please? Marty Crane, she's the heart, the rock. So, the Volunteer Center. Where we're housed now. It's our home. Calaveras Senior Center has helped us. Pickle Porch, Calaveras Mini Storage, Calaveras Community Television, Murphy's Hotel, Momo's, Brandy's Thrifty, Raven's Basket, and Angel's Camp. Conrad, Lois Conklin, Gail Stark, Starlin Patrick, Autumn Mark, Zolian and Bob Wright, Diane Majid, Danella Kimura, Carrie Steffi, Richard Shoemaker, Jackie Rogers, Ann Seeley and family, Crew Star, Nancy Burton, Teddy Brown, and Gary Rose. So those are some, and I know I don't have, there were many, many more who contributed donations to help this book come out. Okay, I'd like to introduce Linda Toren briefly, and she can tell a little bit more about the books that are coming out. And we're also really lucky to have authors here today that have new books out. So where's Gary Thomas? There he is. Gary Thomas has a new book out, Oh Yes We Breathe. We're real proud of his poetry collection. And then Brenda Cumberledge, I think she's out here somewhere. Where's Brenda? I think she went to MIT. Yeah, Brenda Cumberledge, Steal Away, a collection of prose and poetry. Can you talk a little bit about the program?
It's nice.
I'll talk a little bit about what's been happening. It's been a busy time. And one of the things that has been really important in my life has been Voices of Wisdom, because we meet on Tuesdays. And if I had to keep one thing in my life, it would be that group of writers that meets every Tuesday. And so that's in this volume 4, Voices of Wisdom, Voices of the Grove. And a lot of us had contributed to it, and then we said, I wonder what I did. I wonder what I wrote. Because it was a while back, because of a variety of reasons. Publishing is not an easy business. And so things take time. There's a lot of hands along the way, but I was happy to co-edit that volume. The other projects I worked on was my final project for my poet laureate, and that's Calaveras Poets and Community Poems. And so this, I'm very happy to see it. It has the cover I wanted it to have, which it didn't have the first one. And so it has poems by individual poets, but it also has community source poems. And those are poems where I went around to different events in the county and I got phrases and such from people, and then I put the poems together. So we have poems from District 2, District 3, District 4, 1 and 5, and then we have poems from groups like senior, or the library meeting where everybody contributed and I put together their voice to it. And then I have to thank Marty Crane, because on Earth Day, she went around with a clipboard and made everyone write down something, and it's the longest poem.
Didn't take a lot. Once we told them what you were planning to do in this group social, we were all over it.
Yeah. But Marty's the kind of person, unlike me, who goes out and kind of, I saw the people being cornered.
Which poem is it?
It's the last one in the book, it's Earth Day. It does, yes. You'll see it has more people than the others because of Marty. The other project I worked on, I'll tell a quick story about this. Keepers of the Words, Language, and Culture of the West Point Miwuk Community. And this was funded by the Calaveras Foundation. Right. Well, the quick story is in 1992, when I was teaching at West Point Elementary, I formed a group, after-school group of Miwuk kids, because they'd come into the school and they'd be really shy and they would just have difficulty participating, and I thought, they need to feel good about who they are. And so I formed a group called Keepers of the Past, where they could learn some of their culture and things from long ago and feel good about it. And so they collected language from home and they drew pictures. So that was the original book. It was not published officially. Then in 2016, the children of those original 92 kids were now at school, and they said, well, why can't we improve the book and do it some more? I said, okay. So we did, and we added more language. We added language from Dave, Jeff, Mildred Burley, who were speaking the language. Mildred is still alive, and I see her frequently, but she has no one to talk to because that language is nearly gone. So it seemed important to be able to share it. So then that second edition, 2016, came out with phrases and such. And then this particular one now in 2024 has stories by and poetry by Miwuk elders. And then we interviewed 3 elders from that community, and their transcripts are in the back of this book. And then we do have them on film too. So this has been kind of a long-going story of language preservation. Thank you.
Very beautiful.
And I did forget one of our board members, and last but not least, Don Bannis. Don he's the one who's flying to this around, and he's just a core member. And he's been involved with the writers. You're one of the hosters now. Yeah? We're the hosters. I did want to mention, just before we go into the program, also, the writers group that we have is online. It's Zoom. If you go to the website, you'll be able to find it, and you'll also be linked to our YouTube channel, which is going to be linked up sometime tonight, actually. The link is here. If you go to YouTube and you just search for Manzanita Writers Press, you're going to see any of these interviews, full-length interviews that you'd like to see.
Wow.
They're all online. And thanks to Sarah.
Yay!
she's a miracle worker. I couldn't have done it without her. And none of us could have produced all this without her expertise. I'm just really grateful, very grateful. Anyway, besides our writing programs, we have a poetry group that's meeting, and the next meeting is at the Roundtable Conference, December 5 and December 19 at 6 p.m. And we study a poet, and then we share our own work, and so it's a kind of fun event for poets. Whatever level you're at, you learn a bit of poetry and about your own writing. And so we have multi-genre groups. Linda leads a poetry Zoom on the third Wednesday at 10 o'clock. So contact Linda if you'd like to go on the Zoom. And anyway, I think I'm finished. And now we'd like to start the show. So you're both kind of involved up here early on, you with, the outdoors and enjoying that.
Yeah.
Did you already have your place up here?
No, we bought the land from my father. He loved to come up here, and he came up most every weekend when he could. And then sadly his health failed and he couldn't come up anymore. So he actually put it on the market. And we were saying, oh, what a pity, it's such a beautiful ranch. And then we decided, well, we can't afford it, but we need to buy it, so we did. And that's how we wound up here. And then since then, we've added more ranches to it, so it's bigger now.
Yeah. So I consider you both in the forefront of putting Calaveras County on the map. I mean, as far as a place to come to. That was your dream, and I was reading about the blasting of the rock, and and I vaguely remember, I think it was in the 80s, there was a groundbreaking.
89.
89, I remember
Right.
it, and I wasn't able to go, but I'd read about it, and
Ironstone actually was our building of it, but I was also on the Tourism Commission. I was the very first CFO of the California Tourism Commission, and when it was first started. And so I was very interested in tourism and what have you. And so actually very early on, Murphy's Hotel came up for sale. And we said, well, how Murphy's Hotel goes, so goes the town of Murphy's, so goes our value of our ranch. And because the ranch comes right up to the hotel. And so we bought a small interest in the hotel from the Murphy's Ale and Quail, which is a story that someday you'll want to do
I'd love to.
by itself. Because College of Pacific at the time, these were all kids that were going there. And I went to the School of Hard Knocks, which is work at home, and never went on to college at all. But it said, so we said when we decided to build a winery, we were doing bulk wine otherwise and what have you. We said Ironstone is where we want to do it, Murphy's. We wanted to find a hill and have caverns and have a show place. So it has proven out to be the show place, and now if you look at the whole Sierras, everybody is trying to copy Murphy's. All these little towns and groups are trying to do what Murphy's is doing, and Murphy's, when we started here, you could shoot a cannon down the main street and not hit anything any day of the week. And now you can't find a parking place in Murphy's.
I remember those days.
Yes.
Murphy's, it wasn't the tourist destination, it was just a little
Right.
town.
It was a little town, and when my dad bought the ranch, Murphy's had a population of 600 people,
Wow,
and it's changed since then.
it sure has. But you've been a part of that. You've been such a strong part of the development of Murphy's. I think people
Every realtor,
need to realize.
when they're showing people property, they bring them to Ironstone
Yeah.
first, and then they go out and show them the property, so. But we feel very proud of the fact that we've changed the Sierras as far as tourism goes and people and understanding the value of the area.
Well, you have the concourse d'elegance, you have the big car show. It's so
Right,
wonderful.
Coming up soon.
Coming up.
And the concerts. I mean, who would think? You guys started all that, you know? And it's just amazing. What do you see another thing that you'd like to do? You've been adventurous, both of you, risk takers. I've read about all the risk taking and that, you know, and having to make this a decision, but you've always moved ahead. Do you have a vision? You see something coming that you'd love to
We're
do?
crazy, that's all, we're just crazy.
No, crazy hardworking, crazy visionaries.
Well, you know, if you look at Murphy's and be the Chamber of Commerce, you know, it's above the fog, below the snow. We get a little snow once in a while. But weather-wise, the proof of how beautiful Calaveras is, etc., is that when you go from Angels Camp to Murphy's, about 4 miles up the road on the grade road, you go from the oaks to the firs. And that tells you what the weather patterns are and how cool at night it gets in Murphy's. And the old Bret Hart Center, which was a tuberculosis hospital, are all at this elevation because the air is the cleanest and purest that you find in the state, actually. And so there was a whole series of tuberculosis hospitals built at about the 3,000, 2,500 foot elevation. And so that's the beauty of the area and the county.
Yeah. And you were always conscious of, I think, the environment, what's going to happen to our weather, you know, how we're going to be affected, how your crops are going to be affected.
Oh, sure.
Well, yeah, that's very important.
And I think research was important to you, your affiliations with UC Davis that I read about.
Right.
Always trying to get the expert advice and leading these coalitions. And what I found was interesting was that your organizing and your team approach to all of this and how magnanimous you've been, excuse me, with all that you've done. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, we were, you know, very, very involved with the California Young Farmers, which was the alumni group from the FFA, from the Future Farmers at high school. And being involved there, I became state president of that organization, and I did a lot of traveling up and down the state, visiting the different chapters. And so that was a big education on values and what things were happening in other areas. We worked very, very closely with the soil conservation. I was on the 18 years on the Soil Conservation Board in Stockton, in San Joaquin County. And then between that was my college education, I guess you'd say. And we worked very closely with the Farm Extension, Ag Extension, and did a lot of trials on seed and fertilizers and everything with test plots and so forth with them for many, many years. And we were pretty forward, innovative, and
Yeah.
got involved in many different crops.
And Gail, you hosted events all the time. You were a big organizer, and you had your own
That sounds a little
altruistic,
scary.
you had altruistic moments too, and in charge of social things, and more than that,
Well, I was very involved,
civic duties.
among other things, in 4-H.
Yeah.
And that's how the concourse got started.
This is kind of a journey into your coming here originally. What was the origin? How did you get your company formed? And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we're going to I think Judith should start because she has the longest history in Calaveras County. And then I'll jump in her later years.
Well, I was raised in Mill Valley, but my father was a safety engineer for mines. So we used to spend a good deal of time up here because right after World War II, a lot of small mines were reopening. And so he'd come up and talk to them about safety. And so we usually stayed in the Murphy's motel. He said the hotel wasn't safe because it had no rear exit. So we would come up here and we would stay for a week, usually spring vacation, and then wander around. My father worked, and my mother and brother and I would wander around the cemeteries in the town for the day. And I came to love Murphy's, and also love Sheep Ranch, where I found an old hotel when I was a little kid, I think 8 years old. And in 1968, we purchased the hotel with 3 families from Marin County, which we still own and just use for vacation. So that started it, and then I decided I just wanted to get out. Mill Valley just became filled with yuppies. And I decided I'd like to move to Murphy's. So it was another old house I'd known since I was a kid at Table Mountain Ranch. And so we asked if they'd sell it, and 2 years later we bought it in 1975, and that's when I moved here. And then I went to work at the county. In 1976, I became part of the Bicentennial Commission, and one of the things they did was they restored the old courthouse, and they were required to hire someone with some professional credentials to run the museum. And I had graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in history. And so I went to work there and worked there for 11 years as director of the museum and archives, and received grants to do first catalog the archives, then to do an exhibit at the museum, and then to catalog all the museum artifacts too. So, and during that time, there was the New Maloney's project, so I met a lot of people who were working on the New Maloney's project.
So one of them was me. So I was in charge of the historic sites at New Maloney's, which naturally put me in touch with Judith Marvin, who's the head of the archives. The New Maloney's, of course, encompassed both Tuolumne and Calaveras County. It was half and half. As the reservoir filled, half our sites were in each area, so I began to work closely with Judith. But how I got up to the New Maloney's project was, lots of chance and serendipity, but I got an MA in archaeology from University of Denver in 1972, and then I had the opportunity to go to the Middle East. And I had family ties to Lebanon, so I used those family ties to get on excavations on Phoenician and Roman and Bronze Age sites. And I stayed there for 2 years until 1974, and then the internal war in Lebanon made everybody refugees. Projects were unfunded, everybody had to go home. And I went at that time to Santa Barbara, where a college roommate lived, and I thought it would be a few months and everything would settle down and I would go back to Lebanon again. And that didn't happen. It was actually 20 years before Americans were permitted to go back in Lebanon. So settling in Santa Barbara, I decided to pursue my academic career. I was the director of the Presidio Digs in Santa Barbara, and then when the New Maloney's project came, they needed someone to direct the historic sites, and there weren't that many archaeologists looking at the historic period. Most archaeologists at that time were doing prehistoric Indian sites. But since I'd come from the Middle East and dug cities and civilizations, that the Spanish missions in California were much like the Roman sites. This was essentially Rome in the New World. It was all the Spanish architecture and techniques and Roman technologies brought through Spain, through the New World, and up to Alta California. So that got me embedded in historic archaeology, and from that it was an easy step to the gold rush and to looking at sites after the Indian period. So I was hired as this young pre-PhD. I was on a PhD program, but I hadn't finished my dissertation yet. And there were 1,000 sites in the New Melones project, about 500 prehistoric, 500 historic, and I was in charge of identifying, mapping, excavating, and evaluating 500 historic sites, and I was completely underqualified. Everybody was underqualified. This was the largest archaeological project that had ever happened in the United States.
Wow.
And it was an adventure for all of us, and it was like coming out of a war zone. Still, those of us who meet at meetings and say, we were on the New Melones project together, it's a badge of, early war, early accomplishing enormous things. And that got me up here, and when the project ended, and I faced moving back to Santa Barbara, I thought, I don't want to move back to Santa Barbara. I was living in Tuolumne County at the time. I said, I want to stay here. And cultural resource management, the requirement to have archaeological and historical studies done before development took place. The laws were just being implemented. 1974, the federal laws were passed, and soon after, CEQA came into effect, the California Environmental Quality Act. So I teamed up with Judith, who was pretty much ready to leave the archives, and said, why don't we start a company and we can do cultural resource work up here. She thought that was a good idea too. And maybe we should talk about our first project, which involved friends.
So what was the name of your company?
Foothill Resources.
Foothill Resources.
And it was incorporated, but we learned we had options, so we used limited, thinking, I don't know what we thought. But Foothill Resources Limited was then founded in 1983, because we just had our 40th anniversary party.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Well then, my close friend, Barton Stevenow, who, as we all know, was involved in wines and ski resorts and all kinds of other things, decided to reopen the Carson Hill mine, which his family had worked since 1849. And so he purchased that, and he said, they required me to do this kind of study about history and things like that. What am I supposed to do? And I said, well,
we can do
behold, we can do that. So that was our first big project. And then from there, the Royal Mountain King mine opened, and they thought we were friendly with mining and new mining terms and things. And we were hired to do the project at Royal Mountain King mine, and we did several others. I think the Lincoln mine in Amador County, and anyway, so we got going with mines.
And I want to add, under the tutelage of Bill Fuller,
Yes.
who straightened out our vocabulary and our identification of field techniques, and he was invaluable. Yeah,
It's a good mentor.
very
Oh,
good.
he was wonderful.
He was
Yes.
wonderful, yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you've been involved in all kinds of projects through your professional business. I know there was that one that you were talking to me about with, after the Butte fire, where you were,
Oh,
there was
yeah.
the historic sites
Right.
that we had lost. And that's an amazing project. And I know you've done many over the years, and you want to talk about the ones that maybe stimulated you the most. But that was fascinating to me. It's a reconstruction in a way of a history lost.
Yes, and it was, again, your connection with all your colleagues. So we had a colleague, Garrett Finenga, an archaeologist, and he was the head archaeologist at Cal Fire at that time. And he talked his boss into getting a grant to study historic sites burned in the Butte fire. So at Calaveras County, so he called me and Judith and said, can you identify historic, over 100 years old, we use that as a general thing, that were destroyed in the fire. This would be buildings, ranches, complexes.
Today we're visiting Rex Whittle, Don Whittle, his father, and Nancy, his mother. and I'm Patty Grant Whittle Grant, whatever. And we wanted to talk about the old days, and we were hoping that you guys had some wonderful memories to share with us. Nancy's family comes from, what, Sheep Ranch area, or where did your family come from?
Actually, what do you call it? The Calaveras,
Calvary.
San Antonio Camp. San Antonio Camp.
And they were way back when too, huh? Back
They
in the
were.
1800s?
Gold Rush.
Gold Rush. Yeah.
Irish, yeah, we can't find much about them because of so many Irishmen, I guess, coming.
I know. I was
Margaret Murphy and John Patrick Kelly.
Yeah, that's where. Why don't you guys have red hair? Because your mama was.
No, they called themselves Black Irish.
Oh, okay. Because my dad had red hair, and then
Mine was kind of reddish.
great grandpa had a wife that was Irish, but you know, which Whittle was had the Irish wife?
Well,
Joseph.
Joseph, the first Joseph.
The first Joseph. Oh, okay.
Mary Ann Quigg.
Okay. Yeah. You don't remember her?
No, she passed away in 1927.
Okay.
I think Ray remembered her.
Uh-huh.
He was 2 years old, and I remember him talking about it. But, yeah, she was what they call Little Grandma Whittle.
Yeah, I know everybody has different little names for
Oh,
everybody, yeah.
And they all went by that. But anyway, she came here from, well, I don't know, I can't really say from Ireland.
Ireland.
She was born in New York, then.
Was she?
Yeah.
Her family.
Okay, so then, anyway, on the Whittles, they came out of Australia
Mm-hmm.
and came here, and they wound up in Sonora. And my great-grandfather is the one that was the Joseph Whittle that married Mary Ann Quigg. Okay, then they had 2 boys and 4 girls, and a little later on, about the time that he passed away, just right after he passed away, I think, they had triplets, which was real close. Either he passed away just about the time or right after she had triplets. So there she was left with 2 boys and 7 girls.
Well, the triplets died within the first 2 or 3 weeks.
One of them was born ahead of time, maybe what do you say?
Premature.
And then the other ones died shortly thereafter because the stories I heard is that they figured that she had so much company coming out to see them that it upset her, you know.
Well, I didn't realize he had died before she had the triplets. That's something new.
Well,
Maybe right afterwards.
Yeah.
I think he
Right in the
died
same
right
time
after.
period.
Yeah.
well, they were the last ones to be born, was the triplets. And I don't know if her husband just passed away before that, but or a year or 2 afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, anyway, it was at that time.
Well, tell Patty about your first ancestor that came from Australia.
Oh, Alexander? Yeah. I thought you told me Alexander had his throat slit, but they complained it was suicide.
There's a newspaper out there, and I haven't found it yet. I've found it, but I didn't save it, and I haven't refound it. Alexander Whittle was found dead on 6 Mile Creek. It was below Smokies, Auroras, with his throat slit ear to ear, an apparent suicide caused by an absconding wife and alcohol.
Those damn absconding wives, I'll tell you. I looked her up, and she moved to Sacramento, and she lived with some guy for a while.
Well, first she moved to San Francisco.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, this article showed that she had called the police on her lover who lived with her, and then they showed that she got married to the same guy a couple months later, so evidently it was an abusive relationship.
They immigrated they were assisted from England to Australia.
Assisted.
Assisted.
That's nice of them.
They're supposed to tell all those stories.
That's what we're like.
That's for history,
It is. I wonder why they were assisted, do we know?
Well, they might have stolen a loaf of bread.
That's true. I mean,
in those days.
Yeah, that's true.
And Elizabeth, the oldest, was 2 years old at the time.
And she was born in Australia, wasn't she?
No, she's the only one born in England.
Oh, okay. And none of them were born in Australia?
The rest of them.
All the rest of them.
Oh, okay.
So it would be Joe, Jane,
There was some more kids. They died, I think,
Harry.
over there, and yeah, maybe one 7 years ago. I don't know something.
What I understand, they ran a bar in Australia.
for about 20 years.
Well, the thing is, I looked at the place, the address of it, and it's only a block away from the Opera House. I mean,
Really?
we'd be billionaires now.
Still on, yeah. But yeah,
I wonder why they left Australia. Gold?
Gold, probably.
And it's funny because when they left, they lived on a ship, naturally, to come all that distance across here. And on the other side, my grandmother's side, they married Will, they came out of Philadelphia in covered wagons and got here about the same time. Same year.
That covered wagon must have been hard.
that was the back boats.
Yeah.
And
The
Mills
back-
was in that. Yeah.
Yeah, but they were here a long time, 1600s, the Batten Hills were here from the 1600s.
Yeah, back in Philadelphia, Tennessee, so
Big family we got.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's big, and after certain years, they
well,
scattered
then,
everywhere.
wasn't Joe Whittle, wasn't he kind of known for training horses,
Yeah.
Yeah, and he raised a few.
raised horses?
Is that how he bought the ranch out there? And
Gold, the
He
gold
was
horseman.
yeah.
So my dad came up to Calaveras County,
Okay.
and he looked at the mine, was not impressed, but he was impressed with Calaveras County and the fact that there were logging jobs. If you wanted a job and you could work and you were young and healthy, you got a job. I mean, there was no such thing as a resume or, I want a job. What can you do? Boom, you had a job.
Wow.
So my dad got a job. I'm trying to think if he got the job. I think he got a job at the sawmill first. So he worked not in Martell, but in a place called Associated, which is up in Wilseyville. The Associated Mill.
Okay.
It was a going concern, so.
How many lumber companies?
Oh,
that you
many.
could
There were
remember?
many. There was, Associated. There was a mill in Martell. There was a couple of small mills way up the hill past Lily Gap. There were several mills.
Okay.
Stockton Box, which was just up the hill from where I live. Stockton Box was a big mill that there's still a mill site up there somewhere. So anyway, yeah, so my mom was working with the doctor, and my dad was working at the mill, and then my dad found out he could make more money working in the woods, and my mom, with her degree from UCLA, started teaching at the school. She didn't have a teaching degree, so she commuted for a while to get her teaching degree, but she spent several years without a teacher's credential teaching at West Point School back in the, in the 50s.
So your mom already had a degree from UCLA,
Mm-hmm.
which would have been unusual for her to have a degree back then.
Yeah, I suppose it would have been unusual for that high of an education level for a woman. I mean, there's other stories. I won't go into that.
Okay.
Okay. That's getting
I'll
off
trust
track.
you.
But
Okay,
anyway,
so
yeah, mom had this degree, but she didn't have a teaching credential. So
Yeah.
at some point, she went to Sac State, commuted back and forth, and got her teaching credential. I
Okay.
mean, they were pretty fast and loose with teachers back in the 50s and 60s. If you were an educated person and you could control a classroom, then you had a job. But,
And so what was your mom's name again?
Betsy Willard.
Okay.
Betsy Willard, yeah.
And then what was your dad's name?
Jess Willard,
And
Junior.
Then Junior. So he went into the forest to work.
He went into the forest.
Okay. So now during that time, were there the forester the rules for all of the forestry people to go into? Because I'm thinking like a certified forester. Did they have that type of regulation back then?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay,
I don't know if the U.S. Forest Service, I mean, this property was company owned.
okay.
You know, like I said, there's 75,000 acres in Calaveras County alone. It's owned by the company, and it's been passed from company to company since then. So I think most of the falling jobs my dad had was on private company land.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't just in Calaveras County where he worked. He worked elsewhere. He worked up Highway 50. He had several other jobs that he worked.
So he went into quite a few of the different forests in the Sierra Nevada.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
his first job, I think I can remember him coming home. There was an enormous fire called the Bailey Ridge Burn. And I don't know how many acres it was. It was probably minuscule compared to the fires now that we have to measure in square miles instead of acres. But it was a big fire back then, and it did some major destruction. Well, one of his first falling jobs was to go up and fall burning trees. I mean, the fire had spent itself, right? But there was still trees smoking. So he would go up and he would fall those burning trees so they could put them out so that the wind wouldn't come up and spread sparks and start a new fire. So I can remember him coming home covered with soot, with black, face to head to toe black, falling, burning trees.
I didn't even realize they did that.
Yeah, well, they did that then. I don't know if they do that now. But,
Okay.
But they didn't want, I mean, this was company land. They didn't want it to start again. And then after that, they started to replant. And they replanted thousands of trees, different ones. They planted redwoods. There you can find redwoods up in the Bailey Ridge area. And I can remember my mom and my dad must have brought home some of these redwood saplings, and West Point has redwood trees dating back to the late 50s, early 60s, whenever that fire happened. So the school has redwood trees, downtown has redwood trees, there's redwood trees around.
And those were brought from, your dad brought those back?
Well, I'm sure there was more than just
Other
him. I mean,
people,
lots
yeah.
of people had a job of replanting. But yeah, my mom got her hands on those trees and they planted them around the school, and you can still see those trees up there.
Wow, that's fascinating. So, wow. So your dad and other loggers from this area brought those seedlings, or were they
So
seedlings
they brought some of them
back?
home,
Okay.
yeah, and you know, they planted them around their homes.
Planted them around, and they're still around.
Yeah.
Wow. So how long did your dad work in the forest then?
Up until from like probably the early 60s. I don't know when I can't remember the transition between the sawmill and the woods. It was late 50s, early 60s. And he got injured in the woods in 1971.
Okay.
And that was the end of it for him.
But did he love the forest?
Love the forest.
Because some foresters
It's a
love
good
the
question.
forest.
He loved it up here.
Okay.
Yes, he loved it up here. I mean, the work was good, and you're out of the city. But actually, I think my dad always wanted to move to Hawaii.
So he wanted the palm trees,
He
right?
really liked the climate in Hawaii. No snow. He didn't like dealing with snow.
Oh, that's true.
Snow was a pain.
That's
You know,
true.
absolutely had to have a four-wheel drive. And he had some bad experiences not having a four-wheel drive in the snow.
So then when was the first time that he took you into the forest?
Well, my mom was probably more of a forest lover than my dad.
Oh, okay.
I mean, she did love going up to the creeks and rivers and streams, and I have very early memories. You know, born in 53, so probably 57 or 56, somewhere in there. We went up to Bruce's Crossing and Hunter Creek. Hunter Creek is a magic place. It's a really tiny creek. It's only about 5 miles long. It's got this really productive spring that feeds it. And it goes through this, part of it goes through this very steep canyon that's kind of a lot of lava outcropping, whatever that, it's not exactly lava, but I can't remember the name.
Like a lava cap type
Yeah,
of
it's
thing?
lava cap. So it's a really steep, rugged terrain that you have to go through to get to this little teeny tiny creek. And it meanders a bit, so you'll have, the creek is over here, and then over here there's this big place where a lot of trees grow, relatively flat, and they're huge sugar pines, and Doug firs, and ponderosas, and cedars, virgin timber, never been cut. It's absolutely shockingly beautiful. And you have this little creek going through there, and there's ferns, and there's dogwoods, and there's yew trees, and it's absolutely stunning.
Wow.
And as I fished upstream as a 10 or 12-year-old, I got to there's little holes. It's a tiny creek, but it has fish, right? It doesn't, at that time, it had never dried up.
Witnessing the events, and that is so valuable, Carissa, that somebody goes and actually witnesses what happened as a independent third party, because you're not the perpetrator, you're not the law enforcement, you're a third party.
Yeah, the
But
situation that happened in San Andreas with the gentleman, I was there waiting to see if there was anything gonna happen,
Excellent.
or, there was a fire, so I was the one that was driving out there.
Well, and here's another question, but sometimes you probably get readers who provide you a photo or a video of something that's happened.
Right.
Do you have the resources to vet that? How do you cope with that kind of stuff?
I don't do any of that, but.
Well, Tori does, okay.
Tori or Lance would call the fire department, verify the source from them. Sometimes they'll give us the name, or we have the address and we can find the name of if it's a fire, we can find the property owner. But, we're still dependent on what other people tell us, because we just can't be everywhere. We try. I would really like to be able to be everywhere.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned the scanner, because I can't tell you the number of times that we would hire a new reporter, and their attitude with that squawk box going in the background was, what on earth is that on for?
Right.
They didn't realize that when that thing beeps 3 times and they're giving you the pre-alert before they actually tone out the fire, they tell you what the issue is. Structure fire, Valley Springs.
Right.
And so I'm already jotting down Baldwin Street, oh my gosh, got to listen to this when they tone it out. And then we would listen for the first engine on scene. We have a fully involved structure, flames coming out of the roof, okay, we're sending somebody down there because they're still going to be there when we get down there. So these new reporters were like, I'm frantically writing down, all this stuff that's coming through the dispatch, which they didn't realize was all of the information that appears in the first 2 paragraphs of your story.
Yeah.
And so
it's invaluable to listen to the radio. And I wanted to give it an example, a very specific one. When the Butte fire took off, when the fire jumped the canyon and was headed toward Jesus Maria and Ridge Road and all that in central Calaveras County, I was listening to the scanner and I could hear the tension. There was just like 1 or 2 sheriff's deputies desperately trying to warn people to get out. And you remember there was actually somebody who got trapped in there and ended up dying, didn't get evacuated. And that was when we knew clearly that things were going way, way bad. That it was, and obviously in the early situations, it's chaos, because Cal Fire nobody knows exactly what's happening in the ground except the people who happen to be there. And so that was kind of the first tip that it was going to be as bad as it turned out to be. And that was only because I was sitting in a newsroom and I had other people. I had a reporter already going up Highway 26, and that reporter fortunately did get some of the early photographs and recording some of the damage and that fire coming up on the houses. But these major events quickly overwhelm local news media. The next time we have a really large fire, I don't know what you're gonna do. You're gonna cover it as best you can, but having only 2 or 3 reporters is gonna quickly, you'll get overwhelmed because there's gonna be so much to cover, the evacuations, the resources coming in. There's a whole camp of fire engines from all over the state that'll show up within a few days. All the keeping up on which areas are, remember all which is closed and where can you go back to your property, and
Right.
the rescues of animals. I mean, it just goes on and on. It becomes this vast event.
Yeah,
It's a hydra, yeah, it's got so many tendrils and that's what, the good local publications, they know how to pull on those tendrils and get some information.
And where did you go to school? In Vallecito and
Vallecito, we
Murphy's?
had to walk from, it was a long ways, from way out there into Vallecito. And our cousins lived along the road there, so we'd have to go walk with them to school and then walk back home. One day we were walking to school and these guys in these fire trucks, they had a dead rat they'd throw them at us. They'd think it was funny, but we didn't.
No. No. Describe the dwelling you lived in. The dwelling. What
The house.
You said you had no electricity.
Well, it was just a little 2-room house. The part, like this was the kitchen, and it didn't have no, like a
no
section. Just one big old place, and one part was a bedroom, and one part was a kitchen. And so we slept on the floor. And then, like my brother would come and make sure there was a lot of wood cut for my mother, and I'd help her. And I never, people say, where was your sister? I go, I don't know. I was always there helping my mother, and we'd have to walk, I would say maybe like a block to get water at the spring. And she'd have these 2-gallon buckets. She'd put it on a pole on her shoulders and pack them up the hill, and then she'd stop halfway and rest. And I had to pack these 2-gallon jugs full of water, where she sewed a barley sack around it and soaked it, so my dad would take it to work and the water would still be cold. And we'd have to do that. And when we run out of low water, go pack it from that little spring to keep it. And especially when we need a bath, how many times we'd have to walk down there to
Get enough water.
Yeah.
So no electricity. You had kerosene lamps.
Yeah, I had to cook on a wood stove for heat and for cooking.
Yeah, West Point was the same. We didn't have no water. We had to go to the spring and haul water up the hill.
You had no electricity either.
No electricity either. Lamps.
The first time we had electricity is when we moved into Murphy's. And that was something.
What did you think?
Huh?
What did you think about that when you saw?
We just didn't like it because it used to hurt our eyes.
Ah.
We got used to it though. And then we'd play with a switch.
Of course.
New toy.
Now, Mildred, you told me a story about hunting and also doing things in the old way.
Oh yeah, like when my dad would bring home a deer, he'd gut it wherever he killed it and pack it home. I used to go out and skin it. I liked doing that. And I used to skin the deer and then help my mother when she'd slice it up. They'd always hang it out. They had one little, like a little shed where they'd hang it out there. And then I helped my mother when she'd gather acorn, and she taught me how to make the acorn soup. I used to like that too. And so I know how to do that the way she did it. Like I was watching my niece when she was doing it, and and I thought, wow, that looks easy the way she's doing it. But the way we did it, well, she even had me, like I did that with Rose Mose one time. I told her, I go, you want to help me or let's do it the old way, the way I was taught? She goes, yeah. She goes, that sounds fun. So I had that, this, and my legs just got all blue right here because I was pounding the acorn until it turned to, where I could put it on a thing to leach it. And I go, this is hard. And I was thinking, those old women used to sit out there on those rocks and do that all day long when they have a big time coming up.
Oh,
I go, man, they must have been some strong women there. And then my son made a table thing with the chicken wire on it and then a screen so we could leach out the acorn meal. And so we had to go out and get cedar bark to put over top of it. And now we did that until all the water turned black when it all started clearing up. And I go, the only thing we got to cheat on, Rose, I go, we got to go cook this on the stove.
Yeah.
So, and it turned out real good.
But when you were very young, it was a different matter. Were women grinding near a water source?
Sometimes they did. My grandmother used to do that down below where Gloria lives. They had a table down there in the spring water.
Oh, yeah.
She used to do her leaching right there because there was a big grindstone up there where they pound acorn. Because I used to go up there with her and sit around and stuff while she pounded acorn. Then they would cook it with the big rocks, like Mildred said. They'd get the rocks hot and ash. Then they'd throw the rocks right in the acorn water and they cooked the acorn like that.
And then did they ever, like put it in water and then scrape it with the hand like that? My mother used to do that. Like she'd go going like that. And then
She'd pick it up.
Yeah.
I used to help my grandmother and her mother when they cook acorn down by the spring.
And they'd make the acorn bread.
Yep. They roll it.
Yeah, and it was just so good.
It was just like a biscuit.
You were trained as a river rafter from Bryce, and you're writing a book about that. Tell us a little about your river rafting, how you got into that.
Well, I was when I was about 13, I did a canoe trip down the Russian River with my father and Martin Litton, and Martin Litton's son, Johnny Litton, was about a year older than I was. So Johnny and I shared a canoe, and Martin and my father each had their own canoes. My father got into canoeing because he grew up in western Kentucky. His best friend was Fred Boone, who was Daniel Boone's great-great-great-grandson. And they did a canoe trip down the Cumberland River together, kind of like the John Prine song, Won't You Take Me Back to Muhlenberg County, except they lived in Henderson. I went out there one time and met him, Fred Boone, and his two daughters. They showed off their matching Smith & Wessons to me. Anyway, I got into rafting because I went as a passenger on a trip with Johnny Litton rowing a raft for Bryce Whitmore in 1963. Now, Bryce was the first one to run river trips in California. There were other people who were running trips in the Grand Canyon. There's Georgie White and Lou Elliott and other running trips in other places, but Bryce worked for Lou for a period of time and then started his own company. He met his wife on the Salmon River. They settled in El Sobrante, and he bought a bunch of four surplus rafts, 15-men basket boats they were called, because were not self-bailers the way they were today. So I was a passenger on this first trip, and mostly I was a bailer. And a couple of years later, Johnny had sprained his wrist, and I called Bryce up and asked if he'd try me out. Oh, in the meantime, I had been down the Colorado River as a passenger with Johnny rowing one of Martin's dories. Martin went on to become very famous for his Grand Canyon dories that he ran commercially, but at this time he was just trying to prevent dams that were being proposed by the Army Corps of Engineers in the canyon. And he just took down Dave Brower, Elliot Porter, Phil Hyde, my father, other photographers. We had met when my father was a staff photographer at Sunset Magazine and Martin was a travel editor. So we used to travel lots of places together. Martin would fly in his airplane up to the Redwoods and so on. But on that first trip, Martin was rowing one of the rafts with my father in it, and Johnny was rowing the other raft. And then back in '65, I called Bryce up and asked if he'd try me out on the Stanislaus, which is where his second river trips occurred. And he said, sure, come on up to El Sobrante. And we drove on up together. I forgot to ask him, though, if I was going to be training with another guide or maybe just rowing a baggage boat. But at the last minute, as all the passengers are arriving at the bottom of Camp 9 Road, he takes me aside and says, "Say, Ty, one of my guides didn't show up." Well, that was a lie. I was wondering, would you mind taking a raft full of people down? Just stay behind me, stay pretty close, and just do what I do. And if people ask you what rapids come up, just make up a name like Killer Fang Falls or something. And I guess that was fairly successful on that first trip, but he told me later that he snagged a lot of boatmen that way. He couldn't really say no after
About
that.
being thrown right into
Yep.
it.
So that was my training, the trial by water.
Mhm.
And I worked for Bryce and a lot of other river companies as well, Martin Litton, Outdoors Unlimited.
And now you're writing a book
Sarah
about him.
Mack. No, I'm writing a book because
And not just about him, but your life as well
Yeah,
as a river rafter.
It's a memoir and a biography of
Mhm.
Bryce, who was born in Ohio. He's still alive. He's 96 years old and lives in an assisted living facility in Medford. He recently fell and broke his hip, and fractured his hip, and I go up and visit him fairly often. I make a lot of phone calls, and so as I say, I'm writing this book. I'm at about 50,000 words or so, and I've had some good feedback about it, including from the Manzanita writers group that I participate in.
And you have photographs and video.
Yeah,
and
I've been
things
taking
like
photographs since I was 8 years old, and I have photographs from 1963 on of all the rivers that we ran.
Oh, that's
Pictures
amazing.
of Bryce. I've got just a few with me. I didn't bring too many, but some of Bryce when he was younger on the river. No, just a few years ago at his home and when he lived in Talent, Oregon. That was me when I on one of the rivers. And this was a little pressure gauge that he told a story about how deep is the river. I could share that, but I've kind of gone on too long here.
You had some notoriety too with the Stanislaus River.
Yeah, it dealt with the Army Corps trying to, well, they succeeded in flooding New Stanislaus River Canyon. We used to run the section from Camp 9 down to Parrott's Ferry, and you could even go down another 4 or 5 miles to the old town of Malonis. And through really underhanded measures, through good measures, we put a proposition on the ballot, Proposition 17, which would have protected the river in the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. But they just threw lots of money at the campaign, big billboards calling it a wild river hoax because there was a PG&E power plant upstream. It really wasn't a wild river. The guy Atkinson Construction Company put in most of the money at the last minute, telling lies, showing pictures of dead fish in the river, saying this will happen if Proposition 17 passes. It turned out those dead fish were on another river after a chemical spill. So they just told a lot of lies. And they also confused the issue because like 59% of the people after an exit polling meant to vote against the dam. But they thought that voting no meant no dam, when voting no actually meant no protection for the river. So we lost that by 2 or 3 percentage points. And they started building the dam, completed it, and started filling it. My friend Mark Dubois thought the only way to stop them from filling it that first season was to go chain himself in hiding under a rock down around the reservoir. And he did that. And they eventually did spill the rising waters to prevent him from drowning.
Well, on a lighter note.
Yeah, I don't have, I can't match that for getting involved in any kind of California situations like that, but kudos to you who did. I mean,
So you came in, in the 70s?
I came to Calaveras County in 1972, early in the year, January. And we had a really, really, really warm January. It was like 25, 26 days straight sunshine, beautiful. And I had been living over in Tuolumne County. I was a refugee from San Francisco at the time. Although I grew up in the Valley of California, came up here on the rebound and I settled down for a little while in Tuolumne County. I was in Tuolumne City for a little while, and then I met somebody who, she says, we got 150 acres over here up behind Sheep Ranch, about 6 to 8 miles up Armstrong Road to the end of Armstrong Road. It's 150 acres back in like a box canyon.
So the Catholic Workers Farm? Or
the Catholic Workers Farm is a little farther down the road. Okay. So back then they didn't have a bridge over the top of O'Neill Creek, so you had to ford the creek. You had to go, well, if you had a Chevy, you had to Chevy the creek. So instead of ford the creek. And so anyway, we went across the creek, 6 or 8 miles up, I think it was 6 point something, and then you go across the creek and another 1.5 miles up, and then you go down into this little box canyon, which we call it Sun Mountain. And it was kind of treacherous back then, and there were pickups like sliding off the road during the rainy season, and they had to get up to the ridge to go down into the property. They had a hill called Ball Bearing Hill, and there was cars and car parts and motors and transmissions and rear ends and stuff all down at the bottom of Ball Bearing Hill, the ones that didn't make it up.
Oh dear.
So
Talk about the Wild West.
it was a little tough getting up there. And
1968, my family was coming up here on vacation in a cabin up in Blue Lake Springs.
Oh.
And my dad found himself unemployed from General Motors in 1970 and decided to move his family here. And so I was 4 years old when we moved here.
Oh, so you've been here basically all your life then.
Yeah.
Well, tell me some about the family history after coming to Calaveras.
Well, my dad worked for Ken Emerson when he first got here, and my mom was an RN at the Bret Harte Hospital,
Oh, okay.
and she worked there. As a child, my mom would work nights, and my dad sometimes was on big projects out of the area, so we would sleep in my sister and I would sleep in the nurses' housing there behind Bret Harte.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yeah.
that was behind Bret Harte.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yep. So all that kind of history.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then where did things go from there?
I would say like 72 or 73, my dad opened up his own real estate office.
Oh, okay.
And he originally had worked for a fellow named Frank Bennett in Arnold, selling real estate, and then he got his broker's license and opened up his own office.
Oh.
And that first office is located where Mountain Christian Fellowship is located today, just outside of Forest Meadows.
Okay, yeah, that butts up right up to the
Yeah,
Forest Meadows.
yeah, it was before Forest Meadows existed.
So what year would this be, probably?
I would say probably about 73,
Oh, okay.
74, somewhere in that range. Yeah, so my family's been in real estate here for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
My mom, my dad, my brother, my sister, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and now my 2 nieces.
Awesome. So did you go the path of real estate?
No,
No.
never, always knew I would never go into real estate.
Was it your thing?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
What did you do?
Well, I've done a few things over the years. I worked for UPS for a period of time, for about 9 years, and then in 1999, I started a cleaning and restoration company,
Oh,
and that's what I did for 23 years.
okay.
Until recently, I sold that to my youngest son
Oh, okay.
and started this job at the church.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did you go from carpet man to minister man?
Well, I would say the two operated simultaneously.
Okay. And how
I would say that I've always been dual vocational.
Mhm.
And that was just the way I paid for my ministry, was to work in my cleaning business. So when I started my business, I kind of made a deal with the Lord, and I just said that I would worry about serving him, whatever needed to be done, and I would let him worry about my business. And so that was quite a partnership for 23 years.
Oh, okay.
It was always very good to me in that partnership.
Okay. Now, I know you started out, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as a youth minister.
Well, actually, the first job I had at the church was janitor.
Oh, okay.
That was the first way I served the church.
And what church, or different churches?
Foothill Community Church.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to this day, I still think it was the most important job I've done.
Yeah.
There's something about serving the church and serving others where you can't be seen and you can't be thanked. I think it's very valuable. So yeah, that was my first role, and I've done lots of different roles. My wife and I ran the Awana program. We did that for years and years. In fact, it got big. There was over 100 kids in the program.
Was that at the same facility?
At Foothill, yeah. And I've run men's ministry. I've run Mary Martha's and delivered food to the community members who are in the middle of crisis. You know, you have that bad car accident, or somebody gets that cancer diagnosis. We've fed lots of people that way. And then I taught Bible study to 7th and 8th graders at CFLC, Christian Family Learning Center, for a couple years. And then I'm trying to think of when the years just start to run together. But at one point I got tapped on the shoulder and asked if I would be the youth pastor. And so I did that. And that's probably when I came in most contact with you and your family, because Aaron, your son, helped me with the worship band for the youth. Yeah.
And I know, as a personal testimony, you were a huge blessing to our family.
Oh, well, thank you.
We hit on hard times there, and you had such a heart for those in need, even in your kids leveling in your youth group. And y'all made some exciting field trips too, didn't you, with the youth?
Yeah. What happened was actually the youth pastor before me was Dusty Bach.
Okay.
And he was planning on taking the kids down to Mexico to build houses, a very traditional kind of mission trip. But at that time, the border became pretty unsafe for crossing. And the State Department actually said, don't do it. So they canceled that trip. And what happened was a lady at the church had put together an opportunity for us to go to San Diego. We camped in tents. They rented tents for us, and we camped there, and just outside in El Cajon. And every day we went and worked with African refugees that had been brought over. We did VBS for them, and we did all this kind of stuff for them. And one night we got invited to go to downtown San Diego with the Rock Church and do homeless ministry with them. And we got there, and there was 200 tacos. And we each took a bag of, say, 20 or 30 tacos, and we walked around in groups of 3 or 4, and we gave out tacos to homeless people. And at this point in my life, I saw homeless people as people that just needed to get a job. In fact, I've probably told quite a few to get a job. In fact, I probably went as far as maybe to give them an application to McDonald's as I walked past them.
Yeah.
And so I'm out on the street, and I see this man, and I offer him a taco. And he asked me if I'd like to sit down with him. And he actually, he's on the ground on a blanket, and he actually opened up the blanket a little bit bigger so I could sit on his blanket. To be honest with you, it kind of felt like, hey, sit down in my living room as we're sitting here.
first of all, when did you become interested in saving historical documents and photos all the way back to the 1800s?
Sure. Well, I'd say several things piqued my interest. Starting around 1990, I was in a conversation with my dad about some of his relatives and stuff. I think he hadn't written anything down, but he was talking to me about those things. And I remembered that I had a great uncle that was a lifetime resident of West Point that had put together an album of the history of the town, and had also written a book of the history of the town as he knew it as a kid in the 1800s. And I got a copy of that from my dad and stuff. And I remembered that his daughter had received all, and lived in Chico, and she had received all his papers and pictures. So I found her phone number and went up and retrieved the entire collection from him, which was extensive because it went into all the mining camps, it went into Miwuk influence, the Chinese influence on the town, their contribution. And so all these things I was able to gather. So at that point I decided, well, I'd like to expand on this and maybe write a book. So, okay, you know, we're in research phase, we'll call it. And so I start creating indexes of the papers I'm going through of where buildings are located, when they were built, who had what businesses, who was a miner, what years. And I started creating all these indexes. So I had people, I had gold rush histories, then I had timber histories, then location histories, and then I decided I better do one on Chinese element, and then the Miwuk element, and what families were dominant in that community and what their contributions were. So I created all, and I have all that today. I have all these indexes of all this historical data of who's and whens, and it's been kind of fun to collect it. The next part of that was that I had relatives here in San Andreas that related to Judge Smith. And Judge Smith was the first president of the Historical Society of Calaveras County, and my uncle. And I stopped in to descendants of that side of the family, we'll say, and they had boxes and boxes of albums and pictures. Took all that and copied all that. Gave it back to them. You know, if you don't give things back, you get in trouble. So, and that was another big find. And then I also went to my relatives who, on the Smith side in West Point, there were several residents there of Smiths, but this particular gingerbread house was a Thomas Smith place. And it turned out in one of those rooms they had cut out all the newspaper stories over the years of friends who had passed and their histories and pictures. Families in the old days used to trade pictures of their families. And they were all there. And so I got that collection. So that was a big bonus. Also ran across what Judge Smith did in the 30s is he took it upon himself to write every person he knew growing up and said, would you tell me your history?
Oh, wow.
And not all those letters were answered, but every one of them that went out and every one of them that came back were in this one box. So you could put together these profiles of families of when they showed up and what they contributed to the community, and you know, streets that were named after them, and you'd be able to put it all together in large measure because of what he had gone out and tried to collect. So there's no question those who came back in those days, primarily it seems like in the 30s and 40s, family members really became very conscientious in gathering information and saving it. And I was lucky enough to access it from all the different little corners of of the county, so to speak, and family, and put it all in one place, so.
So what year does most of the history begin that you have, like 1800s, early 1800s, mid 1800s?
So, there's no question that the gold rush one really starts right around the beginning of who first came in, people who came in and did mining and formed numerous mining camps in the area.
And what year do you?
So you're talking 1850, 1851.
Okay.
And so West Point just happened to be a fairly central place to a number of these mining camps in that region of the county. And so what happened is, it turns out an Italian merchant who was over in Rich Gulch went, you know, I think if I set up a store over there, central to where all these little mining camps are, I might do pretty good. So he was the first building in West Point. He just picked a place and said, boom, right here. And it was a meadow area, probably heavily populated by Miwoks, because let's face it, over decades they figured out the best places to live, climate-wise and everything, and water. And so he set up shop, and it became a very dominant central supply point for miners. And they would come in and get their supplies there. And
Now, when miners first came in,
okay.
when it first started,
Sure.
did they bring their families, or was it mostly just the men?
No, just the men.
Okay.
Yeah. Women were the exception.
Yeah.
And so that was definitely the case.
I thought I would begin just by giving a brief overview of my association with the town of West Point. It's not a town I probably would have chosen in my adult years after my own personality, talents, and interests had manifested themselves. I'm more of the cosmopolitan, worldly, intellectual type, and West Point is not really a leading capital city in the world for those qualities. But it has been, in the end, a very happy association for me, and I've spent the better part of my life here, as it turns out. It started in the year of 1946 when my parents moved to West Point from the city of Oakland in the Bay Area. My father had worked in a grocery store when he was a teenager, and he had this dream that he wanted to run his own business. He had been working in the big department mail order store, Montgomery Ward in Oakland, and he wasn't really very happy in that job. My mother had gone to nursing school, became a nurse, and she would have been quite happy, I think, to stay in the big city, but she went along with my father. My aunt and uncle had by that time settled in Wilseyville, where my uncle worked in the lumber industry as a driver of heavy equipment. And they're the ones that made the connection with my parents to West Point. They found out that the little general store in West Point was up for sale. My parents came up and took a look. I think they came up and took a look. I don't have any confirmation of that, but it's logical that they would have made a prior trip up here before they made a decision. And they decided to buy it. My aunt and uncle helped financially for a few years. So we all moved up here in April of 1946. And housing was really very difficult to come by because the West Point lumber industry was already in its boom period. The school population had already increased exponentially, and housing was really hard to come by. So for the first year or so, we lived in rooms in the back of the store, which is still the oldest building in West Point.
Yeah, say when that building went up.
I believe it was in the 1970s. It was called the Rufino Store, 1870s, excuse me. 1870s, yes. It's called the Rufino Store, and it had a checkered history. Our eminent town historian of Artie Wilson, who died in the 1950s and wrote a brief history of West Point, ran that store in two different periods, and it his tenure there apparently was cut short by fires both times. And after the second fire, he decided he'd had enough of it. And it went through a couple more owners before my parents bought it.
But now that building is composed of, it's adobe, isn't it?
Yes, adobe walls with the iron doors and window coverings still there. So that they're indestructible, really. So the frame of the building did survive these fires. And there hasn't been, I believe, a major catastrophe since. And the store's really not changed much in appearance since the time my father had it. Even the inside hasn't changed that much.
So tell me, when did you first come to Calaveras County?
So we opened Pinnell's Carpet One in March of 1976. And so I spent a couple months prior to that scouting the area out, finding a location.
Okay. And this was your first store, or no?
So I grew up in Lodi, and
Okay.
my father had a flooring store in Lodi.
Oh,
And so I was attending Sac State College right after graduation. And my father's brother-in-law knew the Nashes, who had the Chevron station, who still have the Chevron station in Angels Camp. And so they were getting some business out of here because people would travel from the mountains down to the valleys for those kinds of services. And so my father thought it would be a great idea if I left college and went and opened a flooring store. Because my sisters grew up in the 60s, and he wasn't really that fond of what the colleges were producing. And so he was anxious for me to get out in the work field. So that's how I ended up here, was my father sent me up here.
how did you feel about that? Was this okay with you, or?
I grew up in that area where you did what your dad told you to do.
Oh,
And I just,
yeah.
that's what he wanted me to do, that's what I did.
So where were you born?
So I was actually born in Stockton, Dameron Hospital. But at 6 years old, my family moved out to the country in Lodi, out by the Harney Lane dump, for those of you who know the area.
Oh,
So I grew up in the rural part of Lodi.
okay. And you were there how long?
So we lived out there till I was a senior in high school, and then my parents moved to town. And I spent my senior year in a duplex in Lodi, and then my parents moved back out to the country. But I didn't move back home after that. I moved to a tiny little house on the railroad tracks in Lodi that was $50 a month. And I then started commuting to the Sac State Inn.
Oh, okay, okay. So, but you said your parents, before Lodi, they were in Stockton.
So my mom's side, they were Californians for many generations. My grandfather lived in Oakdale, where they had almond orchards. And mom's grandfather was a pastor in Oakdale. And the church still exists, but somebody lives in it as a house.
Oh,
My father was from Oklahoma. And when he was in the ninth grade, they had gone through the Dust Bowl. This is after the Dust Bowl. My father was sent to California to find work to send money home because they were starving. And so they sent him on a bus to California, where he got off and found a job at an ice house. In the old days before refrigeration, they had lots of ice houses.
oh,
And so he worked out here and sent money home to his family.
wow.
My father never made it past the ninth grade. Again, he was raised in that generation where I don't know a lot about my dad. He didn't have that pleasant of a childhood.
Yeah.
He didn't share a lot of stories. The only thing I really know is that, he had a horse one time, and he rode a horse. And then he went into the military, which was what changed that generation, right? He went into the military and got a GI Bill, and he was able to come out and buy his first house because you were able to get a loan because you'd been a veteran.
Yeah.
And that, allowed him to get a job. So that, that whole great generation saved the world in World War II. They also came out, changed the way that we all work today. He got a job at a flooring store laying floors, and where there was an older gentleman who took him home to have dinner, where he met my mom.
Oh, awesome.
And so that's how they got in the flooring business. And then my father was probably in his 40s when he decided to go in business for himself.
Okay.
And then they went to business for themselves in Lodi with 2 other partners.
Awesome. And then you worked for him.
So growing up, yeah, every summer, you know, you had to go out and lay carpet with Dad, even when he was an installer, certainly when he owned a store. And then every day after school, I went and cleaned the warehouse, cut carpet for the next day's jobs, and did those kind of things. But we started working very young. 12 years old, I was in the fields with the migrants, picking fruits and vegetables, mowing lawns, cleaning horse stables for neighbors, whatever we could do. We were expected to work.
Yes.
So he sent my mom and I up here to open the store, and we opened in March of 1976. And then he died in January of 77. And then my mom sold out that store to my uncle. And so I was stuck, because I wasn't planning on doing this. And so, but what I had found was that because my father had died, I could get Social Security if I went to school, if I went back to college. So I did college 5 nights a week in Stockton at Delta College. And I would drive up here in the daytime and work at the flooring store.
Okay. And tell me again, okay, you're in college, but what age are you?
So I'm 18.
18. Oh.
So I opened the store when I was almost 19.
Oh my. That is awesome. That is huge to be in so young. Okay, so Pinellas in Angels Camp was your first, but you have grown further than that, right?
So yeah, we opened a store in Sonora, probably about 05.
Okay.
And then we opened a store, and we purchased an existing store in Rancho Cordova 10 years ago. So we have 3 stores we're running right now.
So Effie was always kind of stern, but she had a big heart. And I remember she and my dad didn't ever really get along very well. But I remember we would pick up her newspaper at Mitchell Mill, and my mom drove the school bus. So I would run the newspaper in, and she'd give me a orange soda and a bag of planter peanuts. And you take 3 sips out of the soda, dump the peanuts in, and then try to get them all back out before the soda was gone. But yeah, she was a character. I think probably in the 90s when I went to remodel the bar, it was an old sugar pine bar slab, and there was a divot in the bar, and I realized this divot was where she had sat for about 300 years with her elbow on the bar. Oh. And there was an indentation where she sat there and greeted everyone that came in. Mm-hmm. And so she had quite a following of people. And as I look back through the photographs, from when I was a kid, it was such a great idea to have that bar, and everybody, just had a good time, and so it kind of ran its course, and by the 80s, end of the 80s, it was pretty run down, and then I reopened it in about 1995, and it wasn't anything like my memory from childhood. It was really kind of a pain to have people there and plying them with alcohol and expecting them to behave in a particular fashion. Mm-hmm. But I don't know how she did it for so many years, except she loved to be around the people, and she always told stories and always had good people there around her.
Did she have true stories, or did she have tall tales?
Well, both.
Do you remember any of them?
I don't remember a lot of her particular stories. Most of them were from other people outside of the family that, told stories about Effie and how she did different things. And, she lived at the end of our driveway. So she lived about 100 yards from our house. And she always had a dog, and the dog always knew Sunday morning he'd show up at our house ready for the leftover pancakes, maybe a piece of bacon. And so I do remember one of my early memories of her. My sister had rabbits, pet rabbits, and she went off to school one day, and I remember going down to my grandmother's house, and her and my mom were taking care of the rabbits and putting them in the freezer.
Oh.
And it was a little bit traumatic for me at 4 or 5 years old that, you know, not so much that they were putting food in the freezer, but that, you know, those were my sister's pet rabbits.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, Effie always had a big walk-in freezer locker room, and they'd always hang deer in there, and you know, that was still you know, using venison and, you know, being self-sufficient.
Lumberjack Day was such a tradition.
Yeah, well, getting the school, I don't think any of the kids that were involved in the 80s, 70s, and 80s in that parade will ever forget being in the parade. And we always had a theme that was very conducive to some kids doing something. But we had every class in West Point in the elementary school participated in the parade. So you're talking about what?
At the time, 200 maybe?
300 kids,
Yeah.
yeah. And I know one of the entries was, one of the themes was, I don't remember the theme exactly, but I know third grade did the Good Ship Lollipop. And the kid, I had a little girl in third grade that looked just like Shirley Temple. She was so cute. Oriole Collins was her name. And we had a boat, borrowed a boat, had that in the parade, and the kids were riding in the boat and did that. And we had a lot of themes that were conducive to the kids doing something. We had a circus theme, and we had book titles, and
Oh, I was in that one with my class.
yeah, that book title was a great one. But just some of the outstanding entries, like I said, the U.S. Navy drill team from Mare Island, the U.S. Marine Mounted Color Guard from Barstow. They came several years. People in West Point gave the Marines a place to stay, and they also stayed at the firehouse at the CDF. And those young Marines just had a ball at West Point. They came to the dance that night, and all the young girls were thrilled at all these handsome young Marines being at the dance. She was a United States champion majorette, and she was only like maybe 10, 12 years old, that came to West Point every year. She was a fantastic young lady. I do not remember her name. And the Douglas County High School marching band from Minden. And we always had dignitaries. Assemblyman Norm Waters was always at our parade, and so was John Garamendi, who was at that time, I don't know, U.S. representative, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But one year he got here really late, and he didn't have any transportation, and we loaned him one of my horses, and he rode through the parade on a horse. And Farrell Kruger logging truck. Farrell came every year without fail. So those are the things that made the parade outstanding. I mean, we knew we were going to have a beautiful load of logs in the parade every year for Farrell. And the Ophir Prison Band was another one that came out of Sacramento, and they were comedy. They were dressed funny and did funny tricks, and we had them a couple of years. Tuolumne County Sheriff's Posse came every year, just faithful. Really nice entry. Then I don't think I've mentioned Bobby Freeman, who was an entertainer from the Nevada casino circuit, who came. And he really jazzed everything up. He wrote a song about Lumberjack Day and sang it as he went through the parade. And the Wells Fargo Stagecoach, we had that almost every year. And I know one year we had my mother was absolutely thrilled to be able to ride in that stagecoach. We had old timers riding in it, and it was just a big thrill for her. Something she'd one of her bucket list things. So that's some of the. Oh, another thing that we had that people have probably forgotten is we had smoke jumpers. Oh, because at the time Landreth and Cassini logging had an airplane, and he picked the smoke jumpers up at the airport in San Andreas and flew them up to West Point, and they jumped out of the plane right by the post office, landed right in there behind the post office. It was women, smoke jumpers.
Wow.
And we did that for several years. And of course, they always had a trail of smoke as they were coming out of the airplane, trailing behind them. And so that was quite an event.
Yeah.
But it's because my connection with Landreth logging and Landreth and Cassini. So that was a biggie. And of course our CSHA champions. There couldn't have been, we had absolutely fantastically beautiful horses.
Say what CSHA is.
CSHA, California State Horsemen's Association.
Right.
Was what they represented. And in later years when I rode in the Rose Parade, I was with California State Horsemen.
Some of those interviews have information and more stories. So, and the audio is going to be really good when you see it, on YouTube. So, we have more to come, more stories and more interviews. So, if you have stories to tell, you have family members, you have people we're working with Judith Marvin and Julie Costello to identify those people we need to get interviewed fairly soon and get their stories because the grant continues. We're going to take a little break and see you back in just a few minutes at 3 o'clock. And we're going to start our readings from the Voices, the new anthologies. Yeah.
That's okay.
So, and then after that, we're having a Voices of Wisdom meeting. So those of you participating, grab one of your books, take a look at your section, read it to yourself, and get used to it. If you find any mistakes, let me know, because always something slips through. No. Okay, I'm going to introduce Brenda Hubbard, and Brenda's book, was a long time in the making on my end. But she added doing some fun things with it, adding photographs. It's a story of her life in prose and poetry, and it's amazing. I was reading, as I'm editing, I wish I had this life. I would have loved to have this life. She's always on adventures, traveling and going off. I just love it. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to make sure to thank Monika and everybody who worked on this book, because it took a couple of years, but without Monika's guidance, I could never have gotten it finished. And I have my friend Mary Ann Dawson here, who taught English and helped me get through the book also. She always encouraged me, kept me going, because it took some effort to put all these stories together. I moved up into Calaveras County in 1976. I was born in Half Moon Bay, and I was born in Mills Hospital, San Diego. We lived at Half Moon Bay when I was a child. And then moved to the peninsula, and then we kept moving east. We moved to Colusa, and ended up in Calaveras County. And now from Calaveras County, a couple of years ago, I moved down to Napa and live in a retirement home. And I'm very happy there, and it's been wonderful encouragement for me, because every month I write poetry for the local Gazette. People encourage me, they like my work. And so I've been having a lot of fun writing, and it was all inspired earlier on by Monika's group here in the Manzanita, what was
The voices.
The Voices, and she has a lovely book in the back there, and there were 2 books before that, and three books, and my poetry, my work is in all those books, and so that's been a great source of encouragement also. So I wrote this book called Steal Away, one of your poems on the front. I said, how about Steal Away? So a lot of people can't figure out where that came from, but strangely enough, the song, the old spiritual, has come back into play. My sister lives in Sedona, and she goes to an Episcopal church there. And last week she said, you'll never guess the strangest song that we sang in the church last week called Steal Away. And I think maybe a lot of you know that. It's an old spiritual. And I do remember it from being a kid and when it was played. And I think that's part of the fun that I have in writing, is that people can remember things in their life, in their history, by reading my book. And so I'm going to start out with the fact that I wrote this book. I dedicated it to my mother, who was a great influence in my life, she and my grandmother. But also part of the reason I wrote the book is I was married 4 times. And some people find that very strange, but it wasn't strange at all. It was just wonderful. And 3 of my daughters from different marriages are here today. One of my boys lives over in Thailand, he's not here. But I'm very fond of all my children, and my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. And so I wanted them to know about my life someday. I never knew about my mother's life. I think many of you here have mothers that were very quiet, very secretive. My mother originally never hugged or kissed or anything like that. There were 4 of us kids growing up, and we were a wonderful family. But we didn't know much about mother and father in their lives. So I wrote this book so that my family would know something about me and my lives, and I guess in particular about my 4 marriages, so they won't think I was some sort of a crazy loose woman or something. I don't know. So I speak to my mother a lot. She's been dead for quite a while now. But she was a very strong influence in my life. A few minutes ago she said, Brenda, for heaven's sakes, put some lipstick on. The new people are used to hearing that, but my mom used to say that to me. So anyway, my first poem I shall read will be one that I wrote thinking directly about my mother. I spoke to my mother last night. I spoke to my mother last night. A vision of her came into sight, though she'd been dead for over 20 years. I simply said how I missed her laugh, and she didn't need to reply back. Just her calming presence laid to rest my fears. I spoke on as if she was right there, sitting and listening in her favorite chair. And then I told her of my present life. No longer a doting mother, no longer a wife. How nice it would be to share some family news, have a good laugh and chase away the blues. No voice came back to me to set my worries free, yet somehow I knew that she would never leave me. Her endless love has a power all its own. I speak to others now to reassure that my spirit and love for them will ever endure. I spoke to my mother last night. And on a lighter note, this is a poem that I wrote actually at the retirement home, and it was published in their little newspaper, the Gazette, and a lot of people replied back to this. They loved it. It was dancing on father's shoes. So I don't know if any of you girls remember dancing on your father's shoes, but that was quite a wonderful thing to do when you were a little girl. Dancing on father's shoes. I remember dancing on father's shoes. I held his legs and he held on to me. We moved around the room, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. The beat was steady and we were amazed. Everyone watching us told us so. Mostly they liked country music. We must have had a lot of it on the radio. There wasn't no TV, no piano to accompany it. Just records and whatever we could tune in. I would climb on his shoes and we would begin. I was small, must have been about 4. I really can't recall anymore. His big hands on my back, we glided around. His feet made mine move up and down. I felt protected and amazingly free. I was so short I barely came to his knees, but we were all very happy in those early days. I loved my father in so many ways. And so then I get on a bit later in my life. This is kind of a funny one because it was done at Christmas time. My father was a bit of a rounder. I think you all know what that means. He liked to stop at bars on the way home. So he had a favorite bar that he stopped at. And he decided that I should paint the window or the mirror behind the big bar. So this poem is called Snowman in the Bar. We lived in a small town in the valley. Mom and Dad, my sister, my brothers, and me. The year was 1953. Dad walked to work, which wasn't very far. We seldom needed the fast car. My dad was loved by all he knew. In a small town, there were quite a few. Walking home from work, he'd stop on the way at a local bar for a peaceful delay to the ever monotonous scene of an unfulfilled life of college routine. Christmas was coming and my dad had an idea. He offered my services without a fear to paint a snowman and his snow family on the mirror, behind the long wooden bar reflecting the light of a happy snowman, his kids, and his wife. I painted the snow family with snowflakes and all. It was all of winter that I could recall. It was rather a jolly winter scene to be painted by a young girl of 13. I was paid $50 by the owner of the bar. It was the most money I had ever had by far. In my life, I painted pictures of all kinds of things, but nothing compares with that early Christmas scene. Yeah.
Great. Come on up, Gary. Gary Thomas, a Modesto poet and a very talented poet. And we met a couple of years ago or so for the first time.
Last February.
Last February. Why has it been so soon? It feels like I've known you forever. Anyway, introducing Gary and his book.
Thank you, Monika, for bringing this book on place. Thank you, Linda Toren, for introducing me to Monika. Yes, I am going to talk. Okay. And thank you, closer? Okay. Thank you to my wife, Susan, who reminded me to stand closer. Her love, support, and endurance during this whole process. I'd like to start off with the first poem from my book, From Yes We Breathe. A fire starter. Shivering in early morning next to the old stove, you build a fire out of juniper and yesterday's news. The aroma of sparks assures you there is a future for you. Your backbone slips into place. So do your eyes, which just now fix on some snowbirds escaped from your soul's sockets. You stretch your handful of seeds to them, and they come to feed. The stove starts tapping its code of heat and hope, its need for another log. You catch. This is a poem called A Respiration, and it contains the line that became the title of the book, A Respiration. Oh yes, we breathe in a circle, built up just before loss, what becomes of us, as some light pries steadily into our long, stubborn clutch on our grief like a diploma, until we can undo our dark surety, let go of dear death, risk a soul as yet unsteady, unfamiliar, unshaped, unloved. Soon enough, though not as we would have it, Gratitude exhales its anima, and we heal, or at least inhale daybreak, built of just common grace, circling and settling like prayer. Oh yes. This is the poem I wrote in January 2017 after another election that was distressing to me. Perhaps it has resonance today. It starts with an epigraph attributed to John Wesley. When I was thinking, okay, now what? How do I deal with this? John Wesley. Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as ever you can. Water, river, spirit, grace. Hard to remember blessings when our screens and speakers spit hatred masked as greatness. When our friends and our strangers have slipped in the swelter of blood we could not staunch. So hard that we must resolve to be patient, decide to tell ourselves out loud, remember to breathe, even when the lies damn near choke us out, even as the apathy around us rises like fog of a swamp. Stand with those who share the common flame, withstand those who steal it. Look, not at a gallery of carnival mirrors, but through all the day's open windows. Find our own steady hands at the ends of our arms, and use them each moment to uphold those who tremble. Make ready to serve. Serve. Clean up after. Listen deep. Look deeper into, through, beyond what's constituted. Then learn deepest how to move like water, like a river, like spirit, like grace, not at, but through. I'll close with this one. I guess I'll dedicate this to all those who read and write poetry. The title is called Widdershins, which is just another way of saying different than other people move, or some people call it counterclockwise. Widdershins. I cleave time to read some poetry not my own, as ripe lemons droop and thrash in the rain from their spiky branches, thin as green twine. The pewter and white cat who wishes to live here peers in through the sliding glass door, almost trusting. Puckered recycling bins lean askew in the street, awaiting the next serrated gust to brighten them. Wind chimes peal for some chance to celebrate, while other musics make themselves from velocity to open tuning. Motley colored mini lights, hammer-strung to our houses' stucco, hold their own against today's downpour. Black cotton masks fester at each downstairs room, plus 3 in each sedan, not enough. Today, courage looks like breathing through any layers, passion and anticipation can't crack. I wrote this poem backwards and forwards, like prayer to poetry, not my own. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Linda, could you come up? You want to read from one of your edited books? Maybe the new Miwuk was, or... Linda's director of Voices of Wisdom, and she's amazing, and she's keeps us all together, keeps us all connected.
Yeah, well, Monika started Voices of Wisdom and I've taken over from her, and we still collaborate on that. And none of the things you see today, the videos and books would be happen without me. I'm going to read from this book. It's called Calaveras Poets and Community Poems, that just is out now. And I have to say, I'll read one of mine, but I want to read one of the community source poems so you can see what they sound like. This is from District 2. So residents of District 2 in the county sent me all kinds of things. And that's my district, so I got a little longer poem out of it. One fellow just gave me one word. I said, "Is that it?" And he goes, "Yeah." So the title of the poem is Unity. This place, this life flows through me, sacred feeling, place and feeling. Spring bursts as round-shouldered hills roll out green roads. We're lucky enough, mud on roots worth every emerging crystal. Spring, autumn beauty, nature sounds, rain sips through cedars, doves coo and coax, rivers echo. Summer, I am afraid, all is brown, hot winds blow until we are green again. We dreamers, schemers breathe deeply, take in the smell of the first rain, grateful communion up in the mountains, back from the ashes where our roots grow deep. Our conscience filled with joy, inside the brain, heart, and soul of tomorrow. This place, this life flows through me, sacred feeling, place of beauty. And other people will probably be reading theirs, so I'm going to read mine, which is a short one called Blizzard. Seems appropriate. The other day it was spring, daffodils everywhere, female hummer returns, jays squawk over nesting materials. It was spring for a few days. We lifted our faces to sunshine, took a moment to count clouds, blossoms on fruit trees, admire themselves. Weather report. Prepare for a dash of winter. Its gray beard reckons snow up to 1,000 feet. High winds may take off rooftops, graceful, possible power outages. The other day was spring. I kept that in mind, as spring will reclaim its everlasting glory. And then this is a long time coming, we all have to say, but in fact, most of us who have things in this were thinking, what did I submit? We just really didn't know. And one of the reasons I joined Voices of Wisdom was I write poetry, I don't write prose. So I'm going to read a piece of, I have some prose pieces here. Weird stories. So I'm going to read one short one. And it's one I normally storytell. It's the first time I wrote it down. It's called The Case of the Traveling Fart. Third graders have a unique relationship with farts. A noisy fart is fair game for the kind of laughing and chuckles that derail whatever else might be happening. A lesson is forgotten. A read aloud stops. Even lining up for recess can be put on hold. Loud farts make everyone laugh and look around. Two thoughts occur simultaneously. Did you do it? I didn't do it. As a teacher, I used to bring out facts and attend to the issue head on. Everyone farts at me. Each person farts about a half a liter a day. Farts have been clocked at a speed of 10 feet per second. Farts are really fast, roughly 7 miles per hour. Women fart as much as men. The gas that makes you fart stinks is hydrogen sulfide, which can smell like rotten eggs, but does depend on who you are. Facts tend to make things boring, so after this information and a few questions, things get back to normal. Something interesting happens with smelly farts. Third graders don't notice it. No laughter or snickers, no one says anything. Weird. I'll give you a few facts about smelly farts and get on with the incident in question. On average, a fart is composed of about 59% nitrogen, 21% hydrogen, 9% carbon dioxide and 7% methane and 4% oxygen. Less than 1% of their makeup is what makes farts stink. But they're stinky and they're less stinky. Smelly farts are due to very small amounts of these compounds in gas. Diffusion of gases happen in all directions, so these molecules quickly spread out in the surrounding area. Yes, that means through any type of clothing, multiple layers, for sure. On the fateful day of the traveling fart, all was well. It was independent reading time. It was quiet and focused when the fart was released. No, not one student looked up, wrinkled their nose, or looked around. I knew who it was because that student's face flushed pink, and she lowered her head further into her book. Unfortunate. The smell was ghastly, putrid, overwhelming, still no reaction from the class. The only thing to do was to open the doors on either side of the room and hope the breeze might dilute you. Of course, you can't see a fart. The breeze was stiff. It roared through the room, taking papers off the wall and ruffling papers on my desk. I looked out the window and saw the custodian and sixth grade teacher talking in the block right of bed of flowers. As the breeze cleared down, I saw the two men stop talking, look around, and put their hands to their nose. It turned away. I turned away not to incriminate ourselves, but what's that? I'll never tell. I wonder if the children have immature smelling capacities, or if adults have some deep biological reason for noting sensory information. No one had died that day. No one was endangered in any way.
It's really hard to follow that one. I was reading the children's book of that monster. They're vicious. When they flick in the air, they could, go through one of those little flumes and cue over. George Carlin comes to mind, but I'm kind of like, anyway, this is from my book, Moss on a Limb. That's about grades 3 to 6, but as I'm reading, it could be older. Adults like it. The circle of moths rested in cracks between wood slats and on flat surfaces of the side of the cedar house. Their wings vibrated under the glowing rain of a bush. The moths weren't children anymore, as they had cast aside their larvae lives and burst out of their cocoons. The walls of the cells had split open to let light in, crackling the chrysalis made from their own skin. They were newly slipped out of the place of dreams. Now they waited for further instructions from Lucinda, the elder moth, about their new cycle of life, listening under the warm light of the lamps. Some of them would only have 2 weeks to live. Others a bit longer. Their mission swelling inside of them was clear. Bring more moths into the world and then transform once again. 2 moths, Laura and Luca. Picture here, Mary Sexton has done these illustrations. It's just fascinating. 2 moths, Laura and Luca, sat on an oak limb listening to the others tell tales. Another story, please. A newly transformed moth clamored, gripping the sides of the cedar slats under vibrating wings flickering in the lamplight. Just one. Lucinda was feeling her age and sensed her time was short in this world. She lifted a wing to signal silence when a sudden wind gust warned her to beware. Danger! Danger! She howled as an owl swooped down, the wind from its wings almost knocking them off their perches. That was close, her voice crackled. The flurry of the moth wings around the older matron stopped for a moment. She seemed to take a breath and blow it out. But Luna moths do not have mouths. Keep vigilant. We have enemies, she warned. Lucinda went about checking the throng of young moths circled around her, making sure their little legs were fully secure against the wood siding, then settled upon a splinter, forming a chair above the wood planks. She noticed a pair of Luna moths perched on an oak branch nearby, separated from the group. Rebels, she sighed, wanting to be different, to be special, to be noticed, and stand out from the crowd. I remember those days. What is she talking about? Asked Laura. I don't know, said Luca. Lucinda adjusted her wings to fold around her like a skirt and launched into a story, one it seemed she had told many times before. Once upon a time, long ago, just yesterday, or even as long ago as perhaps today, feisty young moths flew against the porch lamp, much like this one. They were half crazed with ambition, circling the bright light and hitting the glass on the lamp again and again. It's ambition, piped up a little newbie, shaking the wing impatiently. She uses big words, another moth whispered, his wings still wet from the change. It's difficult to understand her complicated sentences. Lucinda's wing rustled as she pointed up to the sky. Ambition means, she paused for effect, wanting more than you have, wanting to do things never done before, getting ahead in life, following a call to be important, and something else like, well, maybe greed. She paused, crunching up her moth face, her antennae waved and wriggled, a way of smiling. I want more light, said the wet-winged moth. So is that called greed? She nodded. In a way. I want to dry out my wings and push away sleep. I want to fly away. Is that ambition? Another quipped. Well, if you keep interrupting me, I won't get to the story. Cinda cleared her throat, fluttering her wings. So many patient, these young ones. Don't stop, keep going. We want to hear the story, squealed another, crinkling a bent wing from being stuck inside the cramped cocoon. The elder moth settled into the telling of a tale, making tears well up in her eyes. She sighed, remembering shiny pieces of the old days, like bits of glass, tumbling around in a kaleidoscope. The good times, just 2 weeks ago. We're going to have the stars of the show, our readers' voices. And I said the easiest way to do this is to go in alphabetical order, like in the book, everybody's in alphabetical order. So who's first? Who's here? Jim, come on up. We're going to go to alphabetical. Just come on up when you know you're next. Check the book. First name or last name? Last names. Alphabetical last names. We're going to have to move the chair. And you can adjust the mic for the tall guy. Yeah. Thanks, Jim. Now, we probably have, I don't know, we've got some time, but what do we want to do about, maybe, you may not get a chance to do if you have a really long piece, maybe do one piece.
I have two pieces here, but I'm just going to do the one.
Yeah.
Several years ago, a few years ago, in the class, the assignment was we did several different assignments on eulogies and obituaries and how to write them. And one of the classes was write something that you would like to have people hear at your memorial service. And this is what I wrote. Arnold resident voted most normal man in Calaveras County. At a Calaveras County Town Hall meeting, Jim Alday of Arnold, one of the 4 other candidates for the honor of being named the Calaveras County's most normal man for 2020. The writer cited that Mr. Alday accomplished nothing of any significance in 2020. His citation states that while Mr. Alday didn't do anything bad, he didn't do anything exciting either. Mr. Alday commented that in 2020 he just lived his regular normal days with his normal lifestyle. He did cite some accomplishments. I read some really good spy action books in 2020. I made a goal to reduce my daily 3-hour news reading, almost got it down to 2.5 hours. I made a goal to brush my teeth at least once a day and almost did it. I rotated my snow tires to summer tires and then back to snow tires. Mr. Alday said he was honored to receive this award. He couldn't remember ever being voted best in anything.
Thank you.
Hi. My name is Susan Arkady Barrich, and I'm in both books. I'm just going to do one from each. In the 1960s, my husband's parents built a cabin in Bear Valley, and we didn't meet until the late 80s. And so this Bear Valley cabin was where we put our family together. And this I wrote in January of 2022 after my husband had passed away. I went up cross-country skiing with a girlfriend. It's called Bear Valley, January 2022. I leave a man's footprints in the snowmobile track I followed down Bear Valley Road. My son wisely made me promise not to leave the lodge unless I'm wearing his surrounds. Yesterday I slipped twice in the snow in my boots, landing hard on the first fall on my left knee on the icy street. Adam, my son, says his Sorels are like four-wheel drive with posit traction and snow tires compared to my after-ski boots, which I guess were meant for after-ski in the bar. My feet are large for a woman, size 11, but they're long and thin like the rest of my bones, and they still float around in his boots, but I'm safer. It's snowing today in Bear Valley. Carol and I came up to do some cross-country skiing in the meadow. Well, Carol comes up for the skiing. I just come to be back in Bear Valley in the snow. I'd rather walk than ski anytime. And the walk from the lodge to our old cabin on Upper Shinty Road and back is a little more than a mile. And I especially like walking when it's actually snowing. The flakes are small today. Sometimes they're almost a drizzle rain, and then there's snow again. They fall lightly, and the slightest breeze causes them to whirl and dance around one another as I walk through them. I got up to the cabin, and said hello to it and to the trees I know so well. There are new owners now, and they've done good things with the cabin. The outside walls and the deck railings have been painted black, which looks calming and warm against the chocolate brown of the roof and the ledgers. A nice wood sign above the front door bears the names of the new owners, with a little Bear Valley bear paws carved next to each name. They put a light above the door, too, and the street numbers are on it. We never knew the street number of the cabin. Alan knew the lot number from when his parents and aunt and uncle built the cabin in the 1960s, but street numbers came along later. We would just say to people, it's the little A-frame on Shimkey below the dam and across from the Ark. A large dorm-like cabin with a deck around the third story that put people in mind of a deck of a ship. More than once I sat on the front porch of our little cabin with my watercolors and tried to depict the Ark awash in blue, splashing water and set afloat from the imagined breakage of the dam above it. Alan and I spent a lot of time on that front deck. If there wasn't snow on the ground or rain, we dragged a mattress outside and slept under the magnificent star show that 7,000 feet in the Sierra Nevada of California provides. I remember waking up one night to a sky that looked like the Stars and Stripes. Lines of white clouds were passing overhead, and the stars showing behind the lines. But most nights we could make out Cassiopeia and Pegasus, the Dippers, and Orion. Alan loved astronomy, and more than once drove the whole family up Highway 4 to a spot where he could set up his telescope and watch the constellations and the planets without the interference of the trees. Teenage daughter Heidi would pore over the latest edition of Astronomy magazine to scout out the planets we could see that evening. What a thrill to see the moons of Jupiter like so many pearls, or Saturn and its rings, both planets glowing soft and gold in the black sky. One August afternoon, Alan and I sat in beach chairs on the front deck under the overhang, sipping wine and playing cribbage, while a late summer storm flashed and crashed all around us. Drops of rain splashed onto the soft dirt and against the big green leaves of the mule ears, sending up scents of herb and earth. We counted the seconds between the lightning and the thunder till the storm was directly above us. With one thunderous crash, Lightning exploded into the lake 100 yards in front of us. Then it was over, suddenly. No more rains, no more thunder, no more lightning, as if to say, well, how'd you like that show? We did. But now it's January. The snow has been falling for a couple of hours and the trees are beginning to whiten. Water draining from rooftops has frozen into ice castles hanging from the eaves. The air itself is white. The occasional raven hops from limb to limb or soars through the dancing snowflakes, nutcracker among sugar plum fairies. All my memories, all the friends and family come to me with nothing but love. All is silent except the hush of the falling snow. All is peaceful in the wind. Then I also have a poem that I wrote in this publication that Linda did, the Calaveras Poets and Community. But I'm not going to read it, I'm going to sing it. There you go. Oh. Won't you take me with you to the mountains, my love? We'll climb to the top of the world and look down. We'll sleep where the river is born and moves on. God's own feet touch the earth in the alpenglow of dawn. We'll cross over rivers of flowers that flow from the glacier and wander to the valley below. We'll follow those ribbons of red, blue, and green and lie down together by a cold mountain stream. Won't you take me with you to the river, my love, where the water skims along the white granite track, where... hold on. It's all right. If I had my guitar, I wouldn't forget it. We'll slide on the polish into the swimming hole and let the beauty of this place quench the thirsting in our souls. We'll go where the snow stays on the north-facing wall and slopes gently down to the canyon floor and kisses the water with lips made of lace. And we'll keep each other warm in this cold and sacred place. Won't you take me with you to the meadow, my love, where the forest opens to the crystal blue sky, where streams trickle into the high mountain lake. Won't you take me to the meadow for our own true love's sake? We'll go to the place where the red tail looks down and watches Coyote as she hunts in the ground to feed her poor babes the long summer days. These are the secrets that the meadow betrays. Won't you take me with you to those mountains, my love? I also sing with the Columbia Big Band.
Acapella too.
Oh,
that was tough.
well, I just have to say that when you hear and you experience all the amazing talent, and it makes you cry. It moves your heart. And I have to say that the Manzanita, in particular Monika Rose, yes, that's you,
when the charming husband was in ICU before he passed. I found myself in Angels Camp within an hour, and I thought, aren't they meeting over there? So I went there, and there was a room full of people, and they had been giving a sheet with all kinds of prompts on it. And Monika just said, just pick something and write something. Nothing. Nothing on that paper came to mind. But before I knew it, that pencil and that paper, those were the opportunities. The pencil and the paper started putting lead on the paper. And then she printed it in the next book, and I said, that's fine, as long as you don't let me embarrass myself. So anyway, all I want to say is that this writers group on Tuesdays is, I've heard more people say, I don't write. I can't write. You know, they say it all the time. And then they write something and you go, oh my God, that's fabulous. Because they're writing from their heart, and there's no judgment or anything, and I'm just so thrilled to be part of that therapy group. We call it our free therapy. So, I'll read something. It's,
you don't write, Marty.
Yeah, that's right. I said that because, well, that's the first one I heard say it, but others have said that. So, I'm just, anyway. Escapades of the Sister Squad. Around 1968, new to California, my sister Rosie and I set out from Orange County in my rust-colored Plymouth Duster, headed for Utah where our brother was a hotel manager. With zero experience, we were excited to hit the slopes. After all, we heard that that's what the people do in California. That and visit the ocean. When I gassed up the car, the attendant asked me if I had tire chains, as they were most certainly going to be needed. Thinking back, it occurs to me that even he was looking out for these two naive teenagers who clearly had no clue. So he sold me a set of chains, and off we went. It should be noted that GPS was not a thing back then, so the paper atlas map was it. But of course we were excited, young, and fearless. Maybe just clueless. I now know it's about a 9-hour road trip, but back then all we knew was that I-15 would take us to where we wanted to go, and right through Las Vegas. Oh boy, an added adventure. Looking back, we probably should have started this road trip in the early morning. Oops. After passing through Vegas, of course, we were talking and laughing all the way, and daylight was beginning to disappear. After some time, with an element of concern in her voice, Sister Rosie asked, are we still on I-16? Well, that interrupted the current topic on our trip down memory lane and snapped me right back into the moment. Jokingly, I responded with, I don't remember turning, do you? She didn't either. Without letting on that I hadn't been paying any attention, I consoled Rosie by pointing out, I see trees on the left and trees on the right, and nothing in front of us, just a blanket of beautiful snow, and no tire tracks. Oh dear, sometime earlier might have been a good time to try off those tire chains. We grew up in Ohio, but even so, a need for tire chains hadn't come up. I bit my lip, remained calm, and faked confidence. Otherwise, Rosie might have quietly freaked out. I assured Rosie that all we needed to do was stay in the middle between the lines of trees, and all would be just fine, as long as we didn't run out of gas. We pushed on. Hope, dumb luck, and a fair amount of blind confidence saved the day. After surviving and not becoming a statistic, it gave us yet another funny to reflect back on some time and again. Those sister bonds, you gotta love. And I have to say, I read this again, I was tickled, and right back there with my sister, thinking, oh my God. Or anyone you know hears that inner voice saying, I can't write or I don't write. Ignore that one. Put the pencil in your hand. Monika will encourage you, and before you know it, the lead will be on the paper, and suddenly you'll write something as phenomenal as the sister squad.
Greetings. My name is Marion Toren, and I have two little stories.
and they're about a dear friend in love that is no longer with us. You might recognize him if you've seen he dance anywhere in this county. The first one is called I Could Have Danced All Night. We heard there was a 1930s style dance band playing monthly at the Amador Senior Center. Most of the time we had to drive all the way to Sacramento to dance. We were picky. Our favorites were big band music or Dixieland jazz. Both required serious swing moves. We were at a various level of competence. I had a few years more dance experience than Seth, although he really tried. Even in the Navy, he would grab bar girls who were supposed to be getting sailors to buy them drinks and ask them to dance instead. I wonder if he privately paid the girls to dance, but I decided not to ask. On one of our first dates, I followed him to a local dance class in Murphy's. She was teaching basic swing steps that night. He had a lot to learn. Our instructor quickly realized I knew enough to not have to be there, but it was fun. I was dancing with this tall, dark, good-looking man. Seth and I continued with dance lessons, moving into increasingly complicated swing steps. Eventually, we learned the foxtrot, cha-cha, and rumba. We found buying tapes of dance lessons were less expensive and more helpful, but it did cause an occasional conflict. We never argued over anything, but when it came to understanding what the nice man was demonstrating on the tape, we occasionally disagreed. Actually, we seriously disagreed. The only other time we would get really hot was when I put the peanut butter in the microwave. That's grounds for divorce, he said, ignoring the fact that we were not married, but I got the point. Several years of dancing later, we discovered the 1930s style band at the Senior Center. After warming up a swing music, they suddenly launched into a brisk waltz. I watched Seth stand up a little straighter, square his shoulders, raise his head a touch higher, and hold me in a very proper way for a waltz. It's hard to fake dance steps, but one could pull it off with a waltz, pending the number of Fred Astaire movies seen. Sure, Seth sure did. We had never taken one class in the waltz. He whirled me around the room till I was totally dizzy and asking to stop. After this first waltz, a woman came up to Seth and complimented him on his dancing. Not me, his dancing. I could not believe it. He faked the whole dance. Suddenly, I understood how he could do this. He loved to act in local theater and was good enough to get a few main parts at Stage 3 in Sonora. He was an actor. Lesson, if you don't know the dance step, hold up your head, square your shoulders, and just fake it. And this is a true story.
Wasn't the other one?
Yes, it was a true story. Couldn't fake that. True. It all started at our Toastmasters meeting. Actually, I think it was in this room. The topic for a 5-minute spontaneous speech was, after dying, what animal would you like to return to Earth as and why? My friend, Seth, said, I don't want to come back as a deer, and then proceeded to act out the rest of his speech as a deer. Spoof every 5 seconds. He was hilarious. 6 years later, he died. He died at my house, in the guest bedroom. Soon after his death, a bird came knocking on the window. Day and night, night and day. I found myself talking to this bird. I felt he was my friend who had died. His memorial service was approaching, and his longtime friends from the Bay Area planned to visit and stay in my guest bedroom. I told him that Lou and Helen were coming to spend the night, and he had to stop tapping. The tapping ceased. Later, a friend told me that after her husband passed, a rabbit showed up and stared at their house. They never saw rabbits around the house before.
The rabbit stayed for days. Then one day, he was gone. Someone else told me spirits come to visit after a death. It seems all very mysterious. I do not believe in a God, life hereafter, magic, or any sort of mysticism. But I wonder. My dear friend who died at my house was a pilot. He owned his plane and flew often. He loved to fly fantasizing about being a bird. I think he did come back as a bird. I don't talk to my local birds anymore. But if one is my friend, but I wonder.
Impressive, strong, or something to allow creativity. Could the 88 notes represent the many people that have passed through my life in the past 2 years? Have the keys been touched gently or nicely or loud or rhythmic when playing out a song or piece that warms the heart and the soul? Have the flats and sharps that were played given contrast and meaning to my encounters each day? Would my life as a piano fill a room with sounds of joy, love, memories, or imagery of days gone by? The piano represents to me life, some joy, some love, maybe some sadness, as the tunes of many composers play love and no fight. The question, if life is like a piano, I have the choice to pick and choose what notes to play to make a beautiful piece, or I can pound and bang, or bring on a cacophony of noise. And then I was really torn because just real quick, if you look in your book on page 41, we were in the Manzanita art gallery every week for several years. And on the wall was this picture with a blue door. If you see it in your book. And so I wrote a little one about that because I looked at that and I wanted to go through that door. One day we were told to take words from our childhood and try to make them into a story, and this is what I came with. Heidi ho, how did you know that the Clock Drive-In in Bell, California was a place to chill out? Food was served by fantabulous waitresses on roller skates who were all jazzed up in their poodle skirts and snazzy and hip outfits. The rock and roll music encouraged us to get down and do the jitterbug right there in the parking lot. We didn't want to be known as party poopers, so we acted like sock hoppers and looked like eager beavers as we made it into shape. We played to the grandstand and let it be known that we were cooking with gas. It was getting late in the evening and time to downsize and to chill out. We will return here tomorrow as the crowd of groupies began to take a powder and went their way home. It was time to hit the hay and sack out after another day spent in the fabulous 50s. Don't be a fuddy-duddy or a stick in the mud. Come on down and join the crowd.
Well, we get to applaud the piano piece.
Yes, she could easily.
Well, after all that nicety, and sweetness, and kindness, I'm going to read something a bit different. This was my fantasy right after breaking up with my husband. I had a knife fight once. Maybe I should say I knifed someone once. He had shattered my last nerve, and I just wanted it to stop. We'd gone out to dinner, and he made remarks about how dressed up I was, telling me I was too dressy compared to his jeans and t-shirt. I kept my mouth shut and wanted to shout, "Why the hell don't you wear some of the slacks and jackets you have to dress up for me?" Then he made a disparaging hints about the dinner I'd ordered, saying eating meat is so bad for the environment. Since he became a vegan, he thought I should embrace broccoli for every meal. I ordered my steak extra rare just to make him cringe. After dinner, we walked past the theater. He had to talk about how my favorite actor had some politics he didn't agree with. I did not really care if the person playing Bond was a card-carrying communist or believed the earth was flat. We passed a hot dog cart, and I grabbed a plastic knife and told him to shut up, or I would do it for him. Oh. He laughed at me. I had no idea that those serrated edges could do so much damage. That's probably why our marriage didn't last very long. It was just fantasy, really, it was just fantasy. This other one is an homage to a teacher I had and made all the difference in my life. The tests are in, she said. She smiled at me. She was a nice-looking young woman who had given me a series of verbal and written tests. I sat in her small office with fear that they had found out I was retarded or I had some unknown mental problem. This was my 5th grade year of school and the 4th school I had been attending this year. My parents were having a hard time settling down, so we moved quite a bit. I'd been sent to her for testing because I wasn't at the same level as the rest of the kids. The administration decided that maybe I had learning issues. Her testing changed my life. She began with a kind remark to make me relax, and then she hit me with a bombshell. You're smart enough to be put in 7th grade right now. I was reeling. My self-confidence was so low, I thought she was crazy. Do you think your parents will allow me to place you in a higher grade? I stared at her and stammered I could ask them. As it turned out, my parents didn't think it was a good idea to put me with older kids. We moved again, and I don't remember ever seeing her again, but she will always be in my memory. She gave me self-confidence. One encounter like that can change a person's life.
Martinez is up.
Can you hear me? Now? There you go. I belong to the Sick River Tribe. I belong to 3 bands of the Sick River Tribe: Punch Maui, Ilwame, and Wapsi. My story is called Grindy Rock. It was a sunny summer day, and I was getting into my car to start my 2-hour drive home when my 85-year-old mom and sister, Diane, came out yelling at me to wait. I walked out to meet them because I had to park 3 houses down from my mom's house on Patrick Avenue in Hayward. Over the years, the road had radically changed. We used to be able to park on either side of my mom's house, but now we had to fight and find parking space. When I finally met them, I noticed Diane was carrying something. What on earth could she be carrying that's so heavy? Diane said, "Here, Mom wants you to have this." Mom said, "I want you to take this to your new home." I was in shock. It was the only family heirloom we have. It was my mom's great-great-grandmother's grinding rock. Whether it belonged to my great-great-grandmother Mary Wolfen or great-great-grandmother Emma Quinn, I don't know. It was used to grind acorns into powder to make acorn mushroom soup. Many California tribes used granite slabs to grind acorns. Tribes in northern and southern California, we used transportable grinding rocks. In my member of the Pit River Nation, I belonged to 3 bands. It was the grinding rock was heavy, about 2.5 pounds, volcanic rock, not smooth, but old and rough. It was 10 inches high, 8 inches deep, and 9 inches wide across the mouth, with a flat-ish bottom. The rim was notched in some places. At one time, in the early 50s, it was painted royal blue by awful people who stole it from my mom's yard. They probably thought no one would recognize it. They were wrong. It was rescued by my Uncle Roy, who was a close friend of my family, but not a true blood relative. He got it back, and I suspect it wasn't bloodless. My mom grew up with this grinding rock. How she came to possess it, I don't know.
My great-great-grandmother Mary died in 1948, and Mama had the granny box at that time. When she was a child, when I was a child, it was blue and used as a water bowl for our dogs. Susie to Harlow to Charlie, and many dogs in between. You can see it in the background of many family photos. Over time, blue paint has grown off. Today, if you look carefully, you can see hints of blue. Now it is sitting on a shelf in my living room, and I see it every day. Soon after I got the granny rug, I talked to my grandchildren, ages 5 and 8 years old. Wonderful was to see it and touch it. How special it was because it belonged to their 4th-time great-grandmother. Now it's used to feed our ancestors. The phone rang and I went to answer it. When I returned seconds later, there was my granddaughter. She tipped it over and stood on the granny rock and said, "Look, Granny, I can balance on it." Chris.
Really? Okay. You would have sure who's here. I'm Chris Molda. We're glad to be in here. It's been a great day. Thank you, Monika. Thank you, Linda, and everybody. I'm in both of these. One's a poem and one's a story. I want to read the story, but I have to say that my vision has deteriorated somewhat, and I haven't read it over. So, like some of you, I didn't know what if mine was going to be in there. So it's kind of like, okay. But in here it's called the quote story. But after I submitted it, I think I changed it to just to be called Stitches. So you can write that in on your book if you want.
What did you say?
Stitches. It's a quote story, but Stitches. And some of you probably did know my mom, so she's kind of mentioned in here. And I'm going to try to get as close to some light as I can. Can these can't be turned up, can they? If they could, that would help me a lot. Is there somewhere over there? Maybe. Sorry. That's what's happening. It's the dimming of the light. And I don't want it to happen in here. You know what I mean?
Well, no, they're
Mine. Mine.
You got it?
Thanks, guys. Yeah, will it stay on, or do I have to hold?
If you put it on the.
Yeah, this could help a lot. Okay, we'll try. Okay, so I'm gonna call it Stitches. Oh, yeah, that's where it is. You barreling through everything with booming voice, the bulldozer you were to me. You, Mom, are stitched into the warmest core of my quilt. You created it, and I found my good reasons not to admire it. The colors you chose that were not you. The Delft blue and the salmon peach instead of your usual fall palette. Mom, once again, you surprised me. It was as though you were a little girl again, choosing those colors. I know it was a leap for you to want a quilt at all. You waited until retirement from teaching to find time for it. Beyond the presidential responsibilities of church, this club, and that charity, the annual events you played piano for. One was indeed the quote fair, but also your many hats, garden hat, big tree state park docent hat, hospice workers caring cap, and advocate for snakes, reptiles, and amphibians, friend to wildlife of all kinds hat. How you would turn the most deathly frightened person into an awed and inspired snake handler.
How you woke us up from I still do this. How you woke us up from midnight sleep, my brother Mike and I, to show us the one night blooming cactus by moonlight or by flashlight. The marching of things musical, the marveling of things musical and things alive. You're taking me to, you're having taken me to light opera matinees, season after season, always having provided me with the LP months before. How did you know? I'd listen and listen, memorizing every note, every word of each song ahead of time and forever, so that my heart sang and thrilled along with every line when we got to the old Baltimore Theater. I still know those lyrics almost too well. Got to Kansas City on a Friday, but Saturday I learned a thing or two, cause up there I didn't have an idea of what the modern world was coming to. That's from Oklahoma. Wouldn't it be lovely, lovely from My Fair Lady, or hello young lover from The King and I, if I loved you. Carousel. These words and melodies ran tandem to my seemingly unrelated life, but and though it was a stretch, how my adolescent moments of parent anger blamed you, for making me love the stories of bad boy husbands and fathers. Sure, they were only stage dramas, fantastic productions of Rogers and Hammerstein, but I could blame you, Mom, for my bad choices in men. Thanks to you, thanks to those musical tales, indelible to my young girl's perception of love. It's all your fault I can't pick a decent guy. Though decent guys always pick me, I would somehow leave them for the bad boy or for the blindness of one. When truly the best example of man, husband, father choosing was my own dad. Wordsmith, war hero, golden boy to a strong family of ministers and missionaries, gentle to a fault, non-judgmental, my first and ever best example of unconditional love, stitched into my life and right before me. My dad, that's it. Man, Mom, that's it, Mom. You did something right with that guy, so thanks for everything. But back to the stinking quilt. I took it on when you died. It was huge, big enough to cover two beds, yours and Dad's, separate but appearing as one. I offered to cut it in half, cut it in two and give half to my brother, who didn't want it, so I did not cut. To be honest, I didn't want it either. Folded and wrapped it, took it up. It took up too much space in my linen closet. A soft albatross. But thanks to a friend with my same birth date, daughter of one of your other UCLA sorority sisters, who said to me, just put it on your bed, Chris, and you will sleep so warm. Well, one night I did, and she was right. Now I sleep both warm and cool under it. It seems to know just what I need season after season. I guess that's the blessed breathing of layers and layers of natural cotton and hours of a mother's stitching. Slowly but surely, now Delft blue and salmon peach work beautifully together. I love the quilt, Mom, even more than had I fallen for it when you were still here and first made it. I like how some blessings come later and only in a good season's time.
Damn, that helps. Come on down. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to start out with a poem in blank Patty. Where is she? All right. Because I wrote it right after we talked. And it's on my phone, of course.
What's your name?
Did anybody here not get invited to Thanksgiving? I got that phone call this morning. But I got a poem out of it. What the heck?
Tell everybody your name.
I'm Dan Nicholas.
Hi, Dan.
Santa Claus, just like Santa Claus. So we looked up the word screed together because I tried to figure out how to express this phone call I got. I had talked to this woman in a year and a half. I wasn't married to her for 28 years though. Screed on the line. Screed. Sometimes it's a thin layer of grit laid down on concrete so you don't slip. Thank you, Betty. Screed. Sometimes it's an old love on the phone who can't let go of a wrong. So many wrongs. Screed. A long string of vitriol and disguised as words, a special bile reserved for love's long gone screed. Designed mostly to cut and find a blood to bleed, a blood long gone screed. There it is. Hey, look, I had no idea that my poems were in these books, but it's the best way to get something and not have to pay for it. This one here is 13. And this is the meditation, it's on page 13. It's called Friends I Never. It's for all you all who spend too damn much time on your phone, looking at the web and thinking you're friends with somebody. And then you find out, oh, he's been dead for 3 years. Why on Facebook? Okay. Friends I never. Blur. Friends I've never met. Blur. Loves I've never loved. Blur. Seems enemies with voices I've never even heard. Are they but itches yet unscratched, these cyber phantoms at the edge of my cowardly soul? Does real life escape me really, or does it remain a blur? Because I run too fast away from me, from the me that is too fast to even see. Here's a poem I wrote on our class on Tuesday that Linda and Monika lead, and I've been a religious follower for 6 months. I don't think I've missed a session. I've had a friend tell me I should get involved in that group 5 years ago. That's how quickly I listened. It's called Lost. I am an emotion who has lost its way and cannot find even a thought, a single thought to frame me, contain me some. I could have then perhaps found a word, maybe two, if only, yes, if only I could have been a contender, a poem even. I am an emotion who has lost its way. Okay, we've had a lot of love stories up here. I'm going to read you one that's the tail end of the love story. 10-year love story. And this all happened on Jamestown Road. And as you drive by, and if you listen really well, you can hear the house speak, because the house has ears. Words, so I can see them. Hey, you there, listen up, I'm your house. But I do hear them. I do have ears and a brain. I do remember I'm part of the 4S program. Stupid Spouse Surveillance System. Yes, I'm your house. Now listen up. Our wiring has been transitioned after all those eavesdropping from the Cold War years, you know. All the older houses now have this system installed. We live on the walls just behind the sheetrock and the plaster. My house woke me in a dream the other night. Tried to check in with me, see if I'd come to my senses as an abused spouse, a man, a hard knocks husband, a hard to get to listen macho man. Yeah, yes, it's me. Wake up! You were scrubbing the walls in the kitchen, remember? Set the mood, trying to get your deposit back. Oh, so responsible. Back there on Jamestown Road, remember? I tried to get your attention, and you wondered aloud in your brain, and I heard it. Your thoughts. Oh, coffee stains. How could coffee stains get on a door jamb 6 feet up on the ceiling? I tried to tell you then. I heard it hit the wall. I tried to get your attention. You remember? Hey there, dumbass. I'm reading the transcript now. Wake up. I don't mean to be cool, but when your wife brings you a cup of coffee at the speed of light, aimed at your head, hot and in the cup attached, in the fit of rage, no less, remember, you were so proud of your skill to have ducked. Yeah. Well, you brushed it off, you moved with her, you moved with her 10 miles away, and then I heard the ladder go up a month later. And the guest room window screen come off. The guest room, remember? Remember where you had moved? Oh yeah, I think I remember. I wish I had eyes on that one. But with the big house ears, I heard the yelling and the door slam and lock. And your foot scraped the first rung of the ladder, and I heard how proud you were, voicing things in your head that you had set another successful escape route in time. Yeah. Close and lock the guest room door, open windows, step on the ladder, step on the rung, descend, hop in the car, race off. You were so proud of those thoughts of yours. I heard them. A key stored in the ashtray in your top-down Miata, and a sleeping bag stored in your trunk, really, and a pillow even, so you could be gone off to somewhere to safe lay down downtown in less than 90 seconds. Like a fire drill when her hair was on fire. Remember that? A physically abusive wife with her hair on fire. Ah, yes. You do remember that, right? This is your house talking. Wake up. How often her hair was on fire. How entering a new town you scoped out a place to retreat and spend the night and an escape route. Yeah, remember the cemetery you drove by? Oh, what a lovely place to crash. Yes, just like my last time. And the big house ears, I am your big house ears, had to take it in when she screamed in a feigned disbelief when she split your lip with a water jug and you bled for 2 hours. Remember that? Remember, I heard that. That was outside, but I heard that. Yeah. Remember that? 2 houses back. Do you track your move? Now you know. House knows, house has ears. She, of course, scared herself, she said, making you bleed like that. And she signed up for therapy. How sweet. How nice. Then canceled the appointment, of course. Nothing changed. And I heard, I'm your house now. Do I have to keep reminding you that a house has ears? I heard when again, you, oh, masculine dumbass, yeah. You said how her words cut deep, and you reached in the kitchen to grab a knife and hand it to her, saying that, oh, yeah, this would hurt less than your words. What a dumbass, really, of course. What ass hands an angry wife a weapon? Oh, and that time you handed her a hammer? Oh, that was smart. Went through the wall. Oh, yes, that was smart. My. Thanks a lot. I live on the wall, you know. Thanks a lot. Oh, yes. And then there was a day when you were ascending the stairs with her on a rampage behind you. And you, oh, dumbass you, what'd you say? Oh, tell me, dear, that you're not going to push me down the stairs. And she said so sweetly, okay, I'll push you down the stairs. Ka-plunk, ka-plunk. Oh, need some educating there? I think. I'll push you down, yes. Well, your friends and adult children heard the pleadings through the walls. You didn't. You said, what fool poets always say.
But I love her, she's my wife.
Yes, you'd awaken me at times with those dumbass tears, and how you loved her and couldn't leave, blah, blah, blah. How boring. My ears had to be fine-tuned to the stupid channel in your house. Yes, the stupid channel. Anyway, congrats on the silence plate. Minus the rusty bed springs. Finally, I can get some sleep these days. Ears need sleep too, you know. Well, ears in the house need sleep. And I don't awaken with the happy bed spring. So, you say you left her behind finally? Well, no wonder why things were so quiet of late. Except, I do hear naughty sounds joining in with those bed springs from time to time. Which, I don't mind. You have finally found a way to give my ears a break, or at least feed me happier vibrations, and for that, I am grateful. Now, back to the other side of the wall, back to resting my dear self. People forget sometimes. Pass at ear.
Follow that. You'll be glad to know I'm the last one.
Oh, no, not really.
She says, not really, is there more?
There's more.
But wait, there's more. So this is about my mom. What's her name? Your name?
Starlin, it's Starlin
Starlin
Darling.
Patrick is my name.
Starlin Darling.
Yes. Patrick's the last name. So this was written by her proud daughter. It's called A Start from the End. At the end of the train tracks in a small caboose in Council Bluffs, Iowa, is where my mother was born on January 16th, 1935. Although she never said, I can imagine it must have been a very cold, snowy day with only a small wood stove to warm the caboose from the freezing cold outside. Where my mother was born and grew up, she often joked and said she'd been at the end of things ever since. The first time I went back to Iowa, I was pleasantly surprised. It was not as my mother had described it. The time of year was the beginning of spring, the rolling green hills and prepared farmlands ready for planting of corn in precise, neatly lined rows. Beautiful sight of vast openness of land and magnificent blue skies. My husband Dennis and I had driven cross country on a road trip from California to visit our roots. Poverty and depression was common and times were difficult, as were most of her memories. Hand-me-down mended clothes and taped up boys' shoes and boots, scrambling over who got the last piece of pork fat, a can of pork and beans. And the embarrassment my mom had going to the store to get Lysol for what she thought was for her head lice. Only the bare minimum was all her parents could afford. My mom, Yvonne, nicknamed Tootie, was the youngest of 4 kids. Bonnie, sister Bonnie, brother Benny, and other brother Ernie, who died from what my mom thought was abuse from their dad. Times got difficult, and money and food were scarce, so much so that my mom had to live with someone else who couldn't afford to feed and care for her. Aunt Gertrude who wasn't actually a relative, took in my mom and cared for her. She loved and raised this tiny towhead girl, and Aunt Gertrude taught her to play the piano. When she became an adult, she continued to play the piano anywhere she could, but above all, in church. There were other memories of my mom's childhood that weren't all bad. One highlight was when she and the other children would excitedly watch the trains passing when the soldiers were going to war as they threw candy to the children from the windows of the train. The boys quickly stuffing it in their pockets and the girls catching it in their dresses, held up like nests. all the while waving to the soldiers, too young to understand where and why they were going. My mom has since then passed, but not without her eyeliner on. She said, when I die, don't forget to put my eyeliner on and makeup. I don't want to look dead. The wisdom she gained from where she came from to where she ended was worlds apart. She appreciated many things like coats, shoes, and purses. She knew the value of having things and the blessing of giving things to those in need. She always wore perfume like Taboo and another drugstore brand. Just the right amount of makeup and dressed classy in her inexpensive jewelry and often secondhand clothes. She loved deep and cared deeper. A wonderful nurse, a church pianist, a prayer warrior with faith in God to move mountains, and notably the best mom forevermore.
Thank you.
James.
So.
My name is Jim, and this is, the title of this piece is The Present. Thank you.
Yeah.
And say your name.
Jim. Jim. Oh.
She sits in a comfy chair, back is slightly reclined, at a comfortable angle, her legs extended on the footrest. A thin blanket draped across her shoulders, falling away at her sides, a plastic bib across her chest, tied loosely with a soft cotton strap behind her neck, a towel spread across her lap, a cup of tea on the table beside her left arm, her right arm limp in her lap. She gazes out the window, looking onto a peaceful meadow. A deer, she says, with loud surprise. A deer, I saw a deer. He stands by the side of her chair. Yes, it was a deer. There it goes, I see it too. It's running off toward the creek. I saw a deer, she says. Do you remember? You saw 3 of them yesterday. Do you remember? After some time, she says, I don't. She gazes out the window. I believe you, though. How many? 3. You saw 3. A doe and a buck and a baby. A baby girl, you thought. I don't remember. But you saw one just now. I did. I saw a deer just now. He lifts the half-filled cup of cold tea off the table, exposing a dark ring, and nudges it into her left hand. Her right hand rests silently. Here's your tea, my dear. Take a sip, and I'll warm it up for you if you'd like. She raises the cup to her lips. With a hand that quivers only slightly, tilts it slowly and sips, a tentative look flashing across her face. She swallows with some effort. He sees the muscles in her neck ripple and strain as it goes down her throat. Would you like me to warm it up? She sits staring out the window, the teacup resting on her towel, her fingers through the handle. He reaches down and adjusts the cup so that it rests flat on her leg. Would you like me to warm it up for you? I can do that if you like. She sits staring out the window. Here, let me warm that up for you. He gently takes the cup from her hand. I'll be right back. Halfway to the kitchen, he looks back at her, then hurries to the microwave, puts in the cup and sets the timer. While the machine whirs mechanically and the cup spins under a dim light, he becomes transfixed by the spinning until the tinny bell rings. a bell sound meant to mimic a bell. Electrons mimicking reality, and stirs his mind back to the kitchen. He reaches into a cabinet and takes out a brightly colored bag with ribbons on the strap handle. White packing tissue pouring over the top like so much foam. He holds the handle with one hand and takes out the cup of now warm tea with the other. Carefully tests the tea with his finger without dropping the heavy bag. Glances at her and walks across the room. I'm back with your tea. She looks up at him and gasps. Where'd you go? I went and got you some tea. Do you remember that today is your birthday? My birthday, she says with childlike excitement. My birthday. Today's my birthday. Yes, today. How old am I today? Let's see. He thinks for a moment. Yesterday, how old was she? You're 63 today. Is that old? Oh, no, not so old. Do you remember your daughter called last night to wish you happy birthday? Yes. No. What's her name again? Mary, is that her name? Yes, Mary. She called you, and you talked to her for a long time. Did I say what we talked about? Of course, you talked about your garden. You talked about the flowers growing in your garden. She told you about her garden. And thank you for teaching her how to grow flowers. She told you how much she loves you, what a good mom you've been, and about your flowers. She called me? Yes. She called you to wish you a happy birthday. Today's my birthday? Yes. You're 57 years old today. That's old, isn't it? Not so old. I have a birthday present for you. She looks out the window. I saw a deer today in the meadow. Yes, and yesterday you saw 2 of them. Would you like to open your present? A present? Yes, today's your birthday. I'd like to open it. Who's it from? From me, he says, putting it on the towel and setting her left hand on the handle. Reach in and see what's in there. She fumbles with the paper, one-handed, while he crouches down next to the chair and holds the bag on her lap. He watches her pull the paper out and drop it on the floor next to the chair as she's done every day for the last year. She reaches deep into the bag as if reaching for a lost memory and takes out a rock, a river rock, a smooth river rock. The rock mimics the shape of a heart, he thinks. If you use your imagination. He takes her right hand and opens it on her lap, rests her left hand on her open palm and sets the rock in the tube. The rock sits there, cradled in her 2 hands as she looks down at it. She can feel its weight and warmth. She looks up at him with a knowing look, and she smiles wanly. Can you read what's written on it? She raises it up close to her eyes, squints and stares at it. Her eyes move off toward the window and then back to the rock. Can you see what's written on the rock? You're Paul, my husband, aren't you? Yes, I am. And I'm Bonnie, your wife, aren't I? Yes, you're Bonnie. And today's my birthday. Her words are a declaration rather than a question. Yes, it is. Can you read what it says on your present? The phantom deer once again leaps high into the air and bounds off into the trees.
She presses the heart-shaped rock against her cheek. Always, it says. She looks up at him. Always.
Better than turn my back so they won't see the hopelessness leaking from my eyes. They also use the word hope for mundane reasons. I hope it doesn't rain. I hope the cat doesn't get out. I hope there's something good on TV. And finally, I hope my writing will improve. Here's a little poem I wrote for the class and what I thought about it, I guess. It's called The Writing Class. As I look upon this crowded room, all seems as quiet as if attuned. Folks, they concentrate and they scribble, so their work may be recognized a little. Maybe they're writing something funny, or maybe they'll hope to earn some money. Writing is fun when it's done right. It may even reach to great heights. Sometimes I think I'm wasting ink. I scratch my head and worry and think. I write, and oh wow, I've tried. I thought I could write. I think I lied. Maybe I'll just give up the fight and run and hide out of sight. I'll live the life of a useless poet and continue my life as I know it. Am I writing this to feed the masses, or doing it to please these classes? Oh, I checked the clock, I'm out of time. I guess I'll have to end this silly rhyme.
Now, wrapping up is Anne Seeley, daughter of Joy Roberts, and this book's dedicated to Joy. She was, I don't know, what can I say, close friend. She was joy. She was joy. She was joy. And she could make you laugh. She loved to laugh. Full of energy. She's so spunky. Anne's going to read from her.
Wow. Hard to follow that. So I was driving up here today. I had no intention of coming. I'm still kind of mourning, but I thought about it earlier, and I was like, well, it's been a year and a half. I probably should, go up and be of some use. So I'll put on my glad rags, as my dad used to say, and I'll go and I'll put in an appearance. I'll stop at Starbucks and get a little turkey Danish and some coffee and make a day of it. So I came up here and I parked. I drive her car now, so people noticed it in the parking lot and said, "Oh, you must be here. Joy's car is here." And I came in and I, as my mom trained me, I decided I would be of use. And then I was the money. So I didn't want to follow today. I was the square. Because that's what she would have wanted me to do. And now here I am reading a story I've never seen before. And I get to say that I'm also on page 156. Monika emailed me and said, I need a picture to go with your story. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. What story did I submit? I don't remember. And so that's further in the book. But I realized that this is like one of my first days out in public. So bear with me because I have not seen this story. And I'm really excited that this is out because she had several stories in here, and I was totally unaware of any of them, so it's kind of This one's on page 131. I picked it because it's short. It's called Incident Off a Train. Now, my mother was not a writer.
she was a doer. She went and did many things. She traveled, she wore a lot of hats. Chris's mom, various other moms. But I was the writer. And so I heard about this thing called Writers Unlimited. And they were meeting at the museum and the Calaveras Arts Council. And that was just right down the street on Main Street. And I thought, well, I could go on like a Wednesday or a Tuesday night. And I started going and bringing pieces that I was writing. And then I asked her to come. And so we started going regularly. And I had short stories, and she would like bring her red pencil, and she would help everyone to make sure things were. And then before you know it, she was editing the books and running the money and running the shop and teaching my daughter how to make change at the shop. And she just became part of this organization more than I ever have. But occasionally, Monika would say, aren't you going to put a story in? And then I would. And so here she is, incident on the train. I squirmed stiffly in the scratchy seat, trying again to get my legs into a comfortable position, and was wondering about tonight's party when the conductor burst in, yelling that ours was the next stop. My husband woke up, shook himself, and soon we slowly, so slowly, screeched all the way into the station. We'd been in New York for a few days, and were just returning to the small station in the Massachusetts countryside near my parents' home. Out the frosty streaked window, I could see Dad stomping in the snow, shivering as he waited for us. We managed to stand, gather up our bags, and began to weave our way down the crowded aisle to the doorway. I put one foot on the icy wet step and knew I would fall. People were in front of me, of course, and I managed to knock a few of them around as I flew out of the train and landed heavily and clumsily onto the hard snow-covered concrete. Something nasty happened to my ankle in the process, and I hurt as I sprawled in the wet. Dad bounded forward. My husband grabbed me, and together they managed to get me to my right foot. The other one did not cooperate. By now, several people, and the conductor, had hurried forward, asking if I was okay. I needed both of my men to hobble painfully one-footed to the car. The rest of the afternoon consisted of more hobbling in and out of the doctor's office, wrapping of the "it's only a sprain" ankle. And finally, I was resting comfortably in Mom's best chair. She waited on me. Wonderful. The party that night at the club was lovely. My classy black shift dress with the swinging black beads was to die for. But the elegant strappy sandals stayed in the suitcase. My one plain black flat accented the thick and ugly ace bandage around my swollen ankle beautifully, and the uglier crutches added a final bit of glamour to the evening.
Jackie Rogers.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. And I want to start by saying I'm so honored to be published in this book. I think it's very wonderful.
and inspiring. And I'd like to start by explaining why this book is so important to me. It's so beautiful. I started teaching myself poetry when I was maybe 10 or 11. And somehow I got a book out of the library, and I thought, wow, this is so cool. How did I do that, this poem, you know? And I was teaching myself to type with one of those old clunky typewriters. And as I would type the words of these poems, I feel or sense, or I try to imagine what the author was saying and how they felt, and the words they used that were so nuanced, or the rhythm that they used, the consonants that clop, clop, and at a point, so I was experiencing, I used to say, I'm wearing the robes of another poet. I'm wearing their words, and it's warming me, and I'm trying to make it fit. And as I got older, I learned to weave my own cloak, because now 50 years later, I'm not imagining your stories and your words. I'm inspired by it, and I'm touched by it because I've lived such things myself, and I relate to it. And this book is so full of so many different kinds of stories and so many different kinds of poems and paintings and drawings and photography, and that all move my creative soul so much and inspire me to learn more about myself and to express myself. So I think this is a beautiful contribution to art, and I really want to thank Linda for inspiring us all to write this stuff, and for Monika for helping to make sure this got published and putting it together. So I'm going to read two very short poems. The first one is called I Want, and it relates to experiencing things through various mediums. And I want to paint dancing rocks and singing trees and the breath of fragrant flowers. I want to paint my dog's look mischievous pink and her smile royal purple. I want to paint Jesus magenta flower down his gown and out of the lines above his sandaled orange feet. I want to paint my friendships turquoise blue, blending into shades of heart-warm yellow. I want to paint leaves, black mystery. I want to paint my friend's death mental gray and spiritual white and green, although everyone says that's not the right color for the West. I want to paint white out over anything I don't like, but only after I've tasted each and every color that brought it into being. I want to paint my car the color of Thanksgiving. I want to paint my garden the color of renewal. I want to paint the southern wind, teasing my hair like Grandma used to do, running fond fingers over my fuzzy colored scalp. I want to paint cedar smoke carrying my prayers. And I want to paint red angels gathering them into backpacks. I want to paint champagne rivers. I want to paint sparkling pebbles getting drunk and giggling in those same rivers. I want to paint a poem heavy like black-brown soil awaiting planting. And then I want to write it. And this is a poem inspired by Linda, who said, write about your community, what you love, and you're inspired. So I used to live in West Point, and up in the backwoods of West Point, and so this is called Touch This Moment. Touch this moment in your hand, in your palm. Stroke it soft and quivering, about to fly away. Rub this moment in the round, brown gravel of millenniums at your fingertips, under your nails. Or squish this one, ooh, wow, and wet and fresh and right between the fingers. So lush you almost recoil. because it's all so odd and interesting and new. Thank you.
Okay, Ann.
Jackie, what? Oh, thank you.
And Ann's concluding our program here, unless we miss something. Did we miss something?
Fancy?
No, Ann's concluding, but is there anybody I've missed up to this point?
I can do it. After you, I read what was in my.
Well, I have the one, so.
I would have read all
But I think
There's no choice.
the first time I wrote for Manzanita was probably at the fire. And that was quite a time. My mom and I went up to Mountain Ranch after the fire. And there was a genealogical meeting at the Mountain Ranch Town Hall. And there was a gentleman, Mr. Hatch, he told his whole family story. And then we all kind of wept because his whole ranch burned down in the Butte fire. And that was probably generations of homestead, family, dating back to the 1800s. And I turned to my mom afterwards, with tears in my eyes, I said, geez, we really should have a thing where we go around to let the old timers, we ask them for their stories. And then she and I got together with Monika. We should get together and have a program for things that, we could go around and go to the senior center and get people's stories. And here we are today.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. The story that I put in here that I forgot about was a photograph, based upon a photograph taken in 2000. So the story is called The Definition of Family. Working at the Radisson Hotel Union City as a catering manager, I asked for Friday off, but went to work anyway. I brought along my housemate Sharon. We had been roommates in our sorority days at Cal, and we had recently purchased a small California bungalow together in the Glenview neighborhood of Oakland. Sharon was a little nervous coming along because we were meeting my family, but I said she'd fit in just fine. I asked our hotel's shuttle driver to pick up my mother from Oakland Airport. She'd been living in Newport Beach. Mom's flight was on time, and we all enjoyed brunch at the hotel dining room. Mom ordered eggs Benedict, as always, and asked the waiter for a bowl of lemon slices, as always. We waited for Cousin Jill to arrive from San Francisco, a widow raising 2 children, son Danny and daughter Megan. She was flying in from Boston, renting a 7-seater SUV and picking up her brother Michael, otherwise known as Kitten, from the Castro. This was all coordinated before cell phones. Amazingly, the gang arrived on time, and we all squeezed in and began our journey to Yosemite National Park. As road trips go, it was fairly uneventful. Naturally, with 7 people, 2 of which were small children, there were various bathroom breaks, stops for burgers in Mariposa, and lots of photos. Mom and I had recently made a photo safari trip to Kenya, so I brought along my Nikon and we stopped into one of the Yosemite shops because I had to have some black and white film. I wanted to try my hand at some Ansel Adams light photography. Without Google, we followed Mom's maps. Jill drove and I navigated us to Jill's cabin. We all piled out of the car and greeted my cousin as Jill's older brother Craig and his band of folks. His daughter Lena, her mom Lisa. Craig had embarked on a non-romantic co-parenting arrangement with Lisa, who's a lesbian, and Lena was the product. And what a product. At her young age, she was incredibly smart and already an accomplished violin player at the age of 9. We unlocked the door to the cabin. Everyone called dibs on rooms, while Mom checked out the kitchen and began unloading the groceries we purchased. Luggage dumped, we found warm clothes. It was chilly in Yosemite then, and all went for a hike around the neighborhood. Later, Mom, Jill, Megan, and I went to the village, walked around the town, shopping for souvenirs and snacks.
and I looked for black and white film. For whatever reason, no one had any black and white film. For whatever, at Yosemite that year, believe me, we went everywhere looking for it. There were plenty of Ansel photos in shops, in museums, and even on the walls in the Ahwahnee Hotel lobby, but no black and white film anywhere. Everywhere I asked, people gave me the strangest looks. They offered me color films, of course. There was plenty of that. I explained that I wanted to take black and white photos, just like Ansel Adams. People would sagely nod, as if they at least knew who he was. But they looked blankly as if to say, why should we have that? Why didn't you bring your own? No one said, oh, we usually have some, but we ran out. It was something they just didn't expect to have on hand. I took color photos. I took color photos of the dogwoods. I took color photos of people. I took color photos of the mountains and the creeks. Of course, this was before digital cameras, so I had no idea how the photos would turn out. I would have to wait several weeks to return home, go to the photo processor, have the prints developed, and see the finished product. But I didn't really care. I really wanted to take black and white pictures, and this just wasn't the same. At some point, Craig took Lena, Lisa, Dan, and Sharon on a hike up Half Dome, and I think Sharon said she nearly died. Craig tended to walk fast. He drove fast, too. Mom, Jill, Megan, and I came home early, took naps, and read books. Mom started dinner. I wandered around outside the cabin, taking color photos. I came in to find Mom arranging something on the coffee table. She had been browsing in the cabinets and found a Ziploc bag with puzzle pieces in it. No box, no photo, just a puzzle in a Ziploc bag. She opened the bag, put out a few edge pieces, and walked away. Craig's gang came back from hiking, and after we revived Sharon, everybody sat down and found the puzzles. One by one, everyone took a turn. When we weren't out hiking, shopping, or playing, we were sitting there, arranging pieces. At one point, Sharon cried out, "Got the edges done!" And everyone came and marveled at the progress. Then we'd all go off on our various adventures. After another turn driving around the park the next day, I told Jill to stop the car. There was a rundown shack selling drinks and bait. I went in and looked around. There was an old guy behind the counter who looked me up and down. I asked for the 70th time, "Got any black and white film?" He said, "Yup." And he handed me 2 ratty-looking rolls. "Last ones," he said. They were like yellow gold in their slightly crumbled Kodak boxes. I paid the man, thanked him profusely, and practically skipped out to the car. Still had to take more color photos to use up the film in the camera. But finally, I got to load the black and white film. I spent the rest of that day taking the pictures all over again, in black and white. The dogwoods, the people, the mountains, and the creeks. Saturday night, we went out to dinner at the Wawona Hotel. We were a large group. The Wawona dining staff plunked all 10 of us down at a huge round table in the center of the dining room, and we were loud. Craig, Lena, and Lisa were vegetarians, so it was a challenge to find something they could eat. I seem to remember someone ordering a whole trout. Was it Mom or young Dan? That got a lot of laughs. Did I get a black and white picture of the trout? I don't know. It may be tucked in an album somewhere. That night, when we returned to the cabin, we took our attention back to the puzzle once again. Time was getting short. We'd be going home the next day. Someone grabbed a standing lamp from another room and set it up near the puzzle. Craig was huddled under it, adjusting his glasses. Every hour or so, he would mutter, "Pretty sure there's a piece missing." We laughed it off. I sat down and took a turn. I unearthed some pieces that pictured black and white keys. I began piecing the piano together, bit by bit. Mom called out from the kitchen, "I think there's some faces in there too, maybe family photos." So the littlest ones, Dan and Megan, began looking for pieces with faces on them. We stayed up late drinking hot cocoa with marshmallows. and we finally finished the puzzle. It was a shiny black baby grand piano with a lace antimacassar layered with all kinds of framed family photos. There were 2 pieces missing. Young, said Craig. And there were 2 pieces that didn't belong to this puzzle at all. Craig had carefully set them aside. Then we all slowly took the pieces apart and put them back into the bag. Mom put the bag back into the cupboard for the next family. Every Christmas after that, Mom would look for the most complicated 1,000-piece puzzle, then take it home, unbox it, Ziploc it, wrap it, and send it to Jill. Next morning, Jill yelled, "Hey, let's get a picture." Everybody gathered on the railing. I set up the Nikon, set the timer, and ran to the spot we had saved for me. Cheese! The red light blinked, the flash finally popped up, and we were laughing as the photo was taken. We packed up, drove back to Union City, reversing the process, and everyone went their separate ways. Many of us returned to the valley in different permutations. Eventually, in 2019, Jill emailed that she was flying out again to go to Yosemite to recreate the photo, my photo. We all headed there, bringing along a few more pieces to the puzzle. Mom was there, recovering from radiation due to colon cancer. She would ground for 4 more years. Jill brought Megan and Dan, and he added his girlfriend, Mary. Craig brought his wife, Min, and their kids, Mateo and Maya. I brought my husband, Steve, and our 2 kids, Michael with his longtime buddy, Pete, and Lizzie with her best friend, Sammy. We also added cousin Audrey. Min took the picture with her phone. No timer. Kitten was there, probably working on the puzzle we had out on the table back in the motel room. In fact, a whole van of people got lost, and we didn't even find them until later. The law may define the term family in a number of different ways, but it probably wouldn't fit what we have here. For us, it's a group of people who get together, eat, sleep, read, walk, breathe fresh air, love, laugh, take pictures, find adventure, and have fun.